Chapter 587. The more confident Yang was, the more confident Long Qi became. He chuckled when he heard what Yang said. That's right. He wasn't even afraid of Yang. What was there to be afraid of? If something really happened, he could just say that he was being held hostage. With his status as the state preceptor, there was still a lot of room for negotiation. As Yang expected, He Guang was a smart person. He didn't choose to report it immediately. Instead, he decided to look at the situation first, especially when he saw the deep mark made by the bullet on the saber. He didn't have the thought of reporting it. Just as they said, there was no benefit in reporting it. On the contrary, he would be targeted by the mercenaries and be in danger at any time. This kind of life was not what he wanted. 3 days had passed since He Guang left the state preceptor's residence. 3 days later, the latest news finally came. The front army was defeated. General Sang Wingla had no choice but to retreat to Sangnu City and ask the king for reinforcements. As soon as the news reached the capital, it was chaotic. The court was even more chaotic. All the officials looked scared, as if they were worried that Sangnu City would not be able to be defended. If that was the case, wouldn't it mean that the capital would be in danger? Wouldn't it mean that the Lansang kingdom would follow in the footsteps of Jiaoji and be destroyed? It was impossible for others to say that a country would be destroyed. Even in the powerful Ming dynasty, they would only make you submit and would not occupy your territory. This was because, in the eyes of the people of the Central Plains, these were all barren lands and did not have much value. However, the mercenaries were not. Their appetite was extremely good. They really did not care about meat and fish. They could really do things that could destroy a country. Under the lead of state preceptor Long Qi, all the civil officials asked the king to send troops to reinforce Sangnu City. Looking at the same scene below, King Paiyasai felt a headache coming on. Send troops, send troops. He also wanted to send troops, but there had to be troops to send. But now, other than the 20,000 king's guards beside him, there were no extra troops. Even if he went to recruit troops now, it would still take time. Your Majesty, please send troops quickly. No matter what, you can't let the mercenaries pass Sangnu City. Once that happens, the country will be in danger. Long Qi continued to plead on behalf of the officials. Yes, Your Majesty, please send reinforcements quickly. The civil officials below all cooperated and asked in unison. At this point, even Paiyasai could not stop them. Moreover, he knew that if the frontline army was defeated, his 20,000 king's guards would not be of much use. Since that was the case, it was better to support the frontline first. Then they would recruit soldiers from all over the country. Hopefully they would make it in time. All right, this king will immediately send troops. Under the immense pressure, Paiyasai finally made a decision. Of the 20,000 king's guards, only 5,000 remained. The rest were handed over to the vice-captain, hoping that he would be able to help Sangwon and turn the tables around. The army at the front had indeed been defeated, and he had indeed been appointed as the commander of the army. All of this was within the expectations of Special Envoy Yin. The moment He Guang received the military order, he ordered a few of his trusted subordinates to gather the troops, while he himself headed straight for the imperial tutor's residence. To the outside world, they were here to ask about the logistics, but in fact they were here to see the special envoy. The three of them met again. Although it had only been 3 days, many things had changed. At this moment, He Guang was less arrogant and more respectful. Special Envoy Yin, this general is willing to surrender. Please tell me what to do next. Well said, well said. Yang smiled and reached into his pocket. This time he did not take out a flintlock, but a bunch of banknotes. There were banknotes with denominations of 100, 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, and 10,000. There were over 100 banknotes, which added up to 500,000. After taking out the banknotes, Yang placed them in front of He Guang. General He, take these and bribe all the Kiliarchs, centurions, Decharches, and Decharches. This army will be the foundation for you to establish yourself here in the future. This is all for me. It was the first time Guang saw so many banknotes, so he looked a little excited. Sorry, there is nothing for you here. These are all for your subordinates. As for you, this is the only one. Skylark chuckled and took out another piece of paper from his bosom. Written on it was 200,000 taels of silver. Handing the banknote to Guang, Yunk said, 100,000 is the reward for you joining the Duke of Loyalty. The other 100,000 is your annual salary for the next year. Now take it. People worked first before they were paid, but the Duke of Loyalty paid first before he worked. Speaking of which, the payment was the same, but the feeling it gave was completely different. Holding the gold and silver in his hand, Guang was really moved at this moment. With a plop, he knelt in front of Yunk. Special Envoy Yin, thank you for your trust. Don't worry. This general will not let you down. All right, this kneel will wait for the Duke of Loyalty to come. Skylark chuckled. With this kneel, this task could be considered completed. He believed that the sixth young master would definitely praise him. The Duke of Loyalty is coming here? Wasn't I the one who brought people to Sangnu City? Guang was puzzled and confused. Yunk and Long Chi looked at each other and smiled. However, no matter how you looked at it, Long Chi's smile was a little forced. It was not his fault. Who would have thought that the army at the front line would be defeated so miserably? When he heard the latest news from Yunk, he was shocked. While laughing, Yunk said to Guang, who had already stood up, General He, you still don't know, right? Sangnu City has already been breached. The Duke of Loyalty is leading the army to Wanxiang City. Not only that, there is already a group of mercenaries lying in ambush outside the city. They will work together with General He to solve the problem inside Wanxiang City. The time is set for tonight. At that time, General He will be in charge of opening the north gate. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Ah, it was indeed the first time Guang heard this news. He was really shocked. He did not expect that the moment the news of Sangnu City being besieged, the city had already been breached. What was even more unbelievable was that the mercenaries had already arrived at the city without him knowing. At this moment, his legs trembled and he almost knelt on the ground. Yunk did not take Guang's reaction to heart and continued, General, he only needs to control the palace and the residences of the ministers. The matter of taking down the treasury, armory, and granary will naturally be done by the mercenaries. Do you understand? Understood, this general understands. Guang, who originally had a trace of arrogance, became completely obedient at this moment. He originally thought that the other party would rely on him. Only now did he know that even if he did not make a move, Wanxiang City would still be breached. It was just a matter of time. State teacher, I also need your cooperation this time. Yunk turned his head and looked at Long Chi with a smile. Long Chi reached out to stroke his beard and nodded while laughing. Well said, well said. I will hold a banquet tonight and gather all the ministers in the city. That would be great. Yunk knew that Long Chi understood his meaning and smiled reservedly. With this plan completed, all that was left was to wait for night to arrive. Half an hour later, Guang left the imperial advisor's residence. He announced to the public that he had received the full support of the imperial advisor and that the rations were no longer a problem. He then gathered all the subordinates under him for a meeting to discuss matters. At the same time, many carriages walked out of the state teacher's residence. These servants went to the various ministers' residences in the city to send out invitations. It was said that all the civil officials were gathered to contribute to the army that was about to depart. At the same time, they had to pray for the blessings of the gods. For such an important matter related to the fate of the country, all the ministers who received the invitations did not dare to disobey. Regardless of whether or not they were on good terms with the state teacher, if they did not show up now, they would easily attract hatred. It was just for show. They all said that they would definitely attend the banquet on time. Even when the news reached the palace, King Piasi had a gratified expression and sighed when he heard the news. He was very gratified that his ministers could unite at such a crucial time. He seemed to have seen the scene of them defeating the mercenaries while united. Higuang knows how to curry favor and knows the importance of food. Guard Captain Maud, who also received the news, had a look of disdain. However, he did not think too deeply about it. Instead, he decided to attend the banquet at the state teacher's residence at night after a bout of jealousy. No matter what, he could not let Higuang monopolize the limelight. He had to think of a way to build a good relationship with the state teacher. If possible, he could even obstruct Higuang's supply of logistics. From this, it could be seen how terrifying internal strife was. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. No one expected that danger would descend upon them soon. The capital of the country, Wanxiang City, was about to be taken over. Moreover, after Higuang returned to the military camp, he gathered all the officers under him. Then he got his personal guards to seal off the entire venue and began to spend money to buy people's hearts. Not all soldiers valued money, especially those who were part of the king's guard. There were still some who could adhere to their principles. Once he encountered people who did not want benefits, and even cursed, Higuang would not be polite. With just a glance, his personal guards rushed up and killed those who did not know what was good for them on the spot. After killing more than 10 people, the smell of blood was extremely pungent. Only then was this wave of resistance suppressed. When everyone saw that resistance was a dead end and that surrendering would not only allow them to live, but also receive money, many people wavered and signed the oath. Once they signed, it would be difficult for them to go back on their words. Higuang had said that he would announce this agreement to the world later. If anyone still had second thoughts, they would be in trouble and might even be assassinated by the mercenaries in the future. Chapter 588. Originally, some people were still half-heartedly thinking that once they were free, they would pass on the message. But now they hesitated. Was it worth it to risk their lives for a dynasty that was about to be destroyed? There was no fame, no benefits. It was not worth it to risk their lives for a loyalty that they did not know if the king would believe. Not to mention offending the mercenaries, no place in the world would be safe. After settling the army, Higuang finally relaxed and started to plan every step of the night. The sky slowly darkened. Wanxiang City did not have a curfew, so at this time lanterns were hung up everywhere, making it seem very lively and bustling. Especially at the imperial tutor's residence tonight, it was full of guests. Carriages arrived one after another, and the sound of greetings could be heard. Imperial tutor Long Qi was personally welcoming the guests at the door, giving them enough face, making everyone's face even more radiant. Looking at everyone who had a face that showed concern for the country and its people. After waiting for more than 2 hours and not seeing any guests, Long Qi patted his back and said to the housekeeper behind him with a tired look, "You can close the door now." Without orders, no one is allowed to enter and no one is allowed to leave. "Master, don't worry, I know what to do." The butler nodded. This old man who had followed the imperial tutor for decades naturally knew what to do, and even knew what might happen next. The ministers were surrounded, and the army camp also started to move. The first step was to surround the 5,000 king's guards that had not been assigned to them. Fortunately, their guard Captain M.O. had already gone to the imperial tutor's residence for the banquet. Without a leader, it was not very troublesome to deal with them. The second step was to surround the palace, and no one was allowed to enter or leave without orders. This was equivalent to cutting off the connection between the king and others. The third step was to open the city gates and let the mercenaries outside the city in. The first step of the plan was to surround the camp of the king's guards with 8,000 soldiers. Then, under the protection of a group of personal guards, Higuang walked into the camp with the emperor's fake decree in his hand and said that these 5,000 soldiers would also be under his leadership. Many of these 5,000 people were M.O.'s trusted aides. When they saw that their master did not appear, they felt that something was wrong. Some of them were bold enough to look at the Wang Yu in Higuang's hands to determine if it was true or false. Humph, with your status, what right do you have to see Wang Yu? I think you're clearly using this opportunity to rebel. Guards, take him down. Higuang would not reason with anyone. With the military power in hand, he only needed to rely on his own strength to push through. A group of personal guards swarmed forward. Anyone who refused to comply would be killed. Blood flowed like a river. After the heads of dozens of people were separated from their bodies, the others finally became obedient and knelt on the ground in submission. With the matter of the barracks settled, the next step was to seal off the palace. There were still 500 kings' guards left here. Usually, all of them had their noses in the air, and it was very difficult for them to put other people in their eyes. At this moment, when they saw that someone had actually surrounded them, which one of them wasn't anxious to the point of stomping their feet. Some of the more irritable ones even brandished their swords and rushed out, looking as if they wanted to teach the other party a lesson. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Waves of arrows flew over, and the ground was filled with corpses. This also intimidated these arrogant people. When they knew that the other party was serious, they retreated step by step until they reached the front of His Majesty's palace. Only then did they stop with nowhere to go. When the news reached his ears, Paiyasai was really shocked. He never thought that General Higuang, whom he had taken a fancy to, would actually have thoughts of rebellion. Usually, this person looked very reliable. As the king of a country, he also had his own pride. Before the matter was finalized, he still wanted to work hard. Thus, under the protection of a few guards, he wanted to go out and see Higuang. As soon as he walked out, waves of arrows rained down and stopped about 20 feet in front of them. They were not targets, but just deterred. However, this was enough. Paiyasai's legs went soft. If it weren't for the guards beside him supporting him, he was afraid that he would have fallen to the ground. He was also a king, but he was not like Lily, who had fought his way out of life and death situations. He had inherited the throne. When had he ever seen such a scene of shouting and killing? Quick, retreat. Retreat. Send a signal for help. Paiyasai did not know what the situation outside was like, but the only thing he could do now was to ask for help. Soon, a dazzling and colorful firework rose into the sky from the palace. That was the king's signal for help. The firework rose into the air, illuminating the sky and making it much brighter. The Grand Preceptor's residence, which was not far from the palace, could naturally see it clearly. When some of the officials discovered this signal, they were all shocked. The captain of the king's guards, Maud, immediately stood up and wanted to rush out of the Grand Preceptor's residence. General Maud, what do you mean by this? The Grand Preceptor's banquet is not over yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Long Chi sat on the high seat, drinking the wine in his cup as he spoke slowly. Lord Grand Preceptor, you saw it. His Majesty sent a signal for help. There must be some thieves causing trouble. I want to go back and protect him. Maud hadn't thought that this matter would have anything to do with the Grand Preceptor. After all, this was an important minister. If anything happened to the king, it wouldn't be good for him. After cupping his fists and saying all this, Maud turned around and was about to leave with his 4 personal guards. However, a dozen or so guards from the Grand Preceptor's residence appeared in front of him. They all stood with their swords and blocked Maud's path. Grand Preceptor, what are you doing? He still hadn't reacted. Instead, he asked with a puzzled expression. From this point of view, this Maud had indeed relied on his connections to get to the top. His ability to adapt was too weak. He was no different from an idiot. Without directly answering Maud's question, Long Chi only looked up at the sky, then smiled and said, "The Grand Preceptor doesn't think that's a signal for help. It must be a child's trick." "What? How is that possible?" This time, there was no need for Maud to say anything. The other ministers all looked at Long Chi with bewildered gazes. Anyone could tell how intense the firework explosion was. Other than the royal family, no one else could use it. Even if they had money, they couldn't buy it. However, the Grand Preceptor said that it was a child's trick. What did he mean by that? Some of the quick-witted people's expressions changed drastically. They thought to themselves, could it be that the Grand Preceptor was going to rebel? Could it be that he wanted to take the opportunity to rise to the top, or had he already joined the mercenaries? If it was the former, it would be better. No matter what, they were still ministers. Whoever became the emperor would need the help of their ministers. Just by being able to come to the Grand Preceptor's residence today, their status in the future would not be too low. But what if it was the latter? Once the mercenaries took control of this place, what else could they do? That was not changing the royal family, but changing the dynasty. A great purge was unavoidable. Could they still be as high and mighty as before? More and more people thought of what might happen, and more people looked at Long Qi with a different gaze. At this moment, Maud finally understood. He suddenly pointed his finger at Long Qi and said, You actually want to rebel? Nonsense. Which eye of yours saw the Grand Preceptor rebelling? Long Qi snorted angrily, although he controlled the entire scene. He didn't want to cause any more trouble before the mercenaries arrived. Of course, he wouldn't admit that he was rebelling. Seeing that Long Qi was still pretending at this time, Maud was also very angry. He pointed his finger and said, All right, if you're not rebelling, then do you dare to let this general out? Maud had already thought it through. No matter what the Grand Preceptor's actions were, he would definitely mobilize an army to annihilate the Grand Preceptor's residence this time. In any case, this person had already walked together with Higuang, so he was his enemy. He would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. How could this little thought be hidden from Long Qi's eyes? To be able to become the Grand Preceptor, his IQ was definitely extremely high. He chuckled. Right now, this is a banquet held by the Grand Preceptor. The purpose of this banquet is to solve the various difficulties of the general at the front. Right now, we haven't even talked about the proper matters, so no one is allowed to leave. After casually finding a reason, Long Qi returned to his seat. In any case, this place was already under his control. It was impossible for Maud and his 4 personal guards to kill their way out. Come, everyone drink. Don't let such a small matter affect everyone's elegance. As he spoke, Long Qi really raised his cup to everyone. At this moment, he had no choice but to lower his head under the eaves. After a moment of hesitation, the other ministers raised their cups one after another. In their opinion, no matter what the outcome was, falling out with the Grand Preceptor now would not result in a good outcome. Didn't you see that more and more soldiers were appearing in the surroundings? Each of them held a large blade in their hands and had a fierce look on their faces. It was as if they would fight and take someone's life at the slightest disagreement. In order to stabilize these officials, he didn't want them to cause trouble. Long Qi had specially borrowed 500 soldiers from Higuang. With these 500 people, it was enough to stabilize the situation here. Maud was still angry in his heart, especially when he saw that the soldiers who appeared were actually from the King's Guard. Long Qi's heart was as clear as day. However, it was precisely because of the appearance of these people that he had no choice but to cower. This was because what he saw in the eyes of these soldiers was not the reverence of seeing their general. Instead, their faces were filled with killing intent. Relying on nepotism to get to the top, it was naturally easy for Mo to use his connections to intimidate others. He could even act out his true colors. However, if one were to talk about fighting to the death, then he did not have the guts to do so. Chapter 589. In the end, Maud obediently returned to his seat and sat down. Since even he lowered his head, the other ministers did not dare to provoke him. They all forced a smile and acted as if they did not see the changes in their surroundings. This was exactly what Long Qi wanted. He chuckled and continued to chat with everyone, but he did not mention anything about the issue of providing security for the soldiers. Fortunately, everyone could see that this was to imprison them. Since that was the case, as long as they behaved themselves, they should be able to keep their lives. At the north city gate, the torches outside circled 3 times, and the torches on the city tower circled twice before the gates opened. The 3 regiments of the Lang Fong Battalion suddenly appeared like ghosts in the night and entered the city through the open city gate. With a high-speed bicycle, Wu Sheng brought the 3 regiments to the outskirts of Wanxiang City in the morning. They even had a chance to catch up on sleep and eat before entering the city energetically. The 3 regiments of more than 1,000 soldiers were like a silent giant dragon. Other than the sound of their orderly footsteps, there was no other movement. Just this aura alone was enough to scare many of the Lancang soldiers. As they walked, the 3 regiments divided their soldiers. For example, they left a platoon of soldiers behind at the East City gate that they were allowed to enter. The creed of the Lang Fong Battalion was that they could trust their officers and comrades, but they would not easily trust others. For places like the city gate that could be attacked or retreated, it was better to leave their own people behind to make them feel more at ease. Political Commissar Chen, I will have to trouble you to make a trip to the Grand Tutor's residence and settle the matters there. 3rd Battalion Commander, you are in charge of taking over the treasury, armory, and granary in the city. There must not be any accidents. Wu Sheng walked forward with large strides while giving orders to the political commissar and 2nd Battalion Commander Chen Bo and 3rd Battalion Commander Chang Chen. This was originally a plan that had been discussed outside the city. The 2 battalion commanders naturally agreed and nodded before starting their own operations. As the regiment commander, Wu Sheng led his men straight to the palace. The moment they entered the city, the agents of the security bureau rushed over to lead the way. As long as the target was pointed out, there would not be any mistakes. In the king's bedroom deep in the palace, Pai Yasai was pacing back and forth anxiously. The distress signal had already been sent out, but until now, no one had come to protect him. Could it be that the situation had changed? Could it be that he was already alone? Reporting to your majesty, there's another group of people outside. Just as Pai Yasai was feeling anxious, a guard walked in and knelt on the ground. Haha, reinforcements have finally arrived? Tell everyone to get ready. Once there's a chance, we'll attack from both inside and outside. He thought that his reinforcements had finally arrived. At this moment, he was full of confidence. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. This time, Panacea was destined to be disappointed. Although there were people coming, they were not his reinforcements. They were Zhang Chang's enemy, the commander of the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Front, Wu Sheng. He Guang was guarding this place. After all, this place was of great importance. After knowing that the mercenaries had finally arrived, he tidied up his uniform and went to greet them. You are He Guang. Wu Sheng walked up to a general in armor and asked in a condescending manner. Yes, I am He Guang. He did not know why, but when he saw Wu Sheng, he felt a strong sense of oppression. There was even a murderous aura coming straight at him. This was a natural result of killing too many people on the battlefield. It was not something that He Guang, who had always stayed in the palace, could compare to. You've done well. Let me introduce myself. I'm the commander of the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Front, Wu Sheng. You can call me Commander Wu. Oh, right, how's the situation? He continued to ask as he walked, but his eyes were observing the surroundings intentionally or unintentionally. Although the Security Bureau's intelligence said that He Guang was trustworthy, before the overall situation was settled, he should not let his guard down. When he heard that the other party was the commander of the Cold Front, He Guang immediately felt his aura weaken. In the past few days, he had learned about the mercenaries from various sources. He also knew that the Cold Front was the most powerful force among the mercenaries. Now that a commander had appeared, how could he not be nervous? Commander Wu, your majesty, no. Pasha is in the front yard of the palace. He still has a few hundred guards under him. Their skills and combat strength are not bad. He Guang gave a simple introduction of the situation. However, when Wu Sheng heard this, he did not think much of it. Their combat strength is not bad. Then I would like to see their strength. Come, where is the commander of the 4th company? I'll give you 2 incense sticks time to beat them into submission. If you can't complete the mission, you're not allowed to eat meat for a week. Yes. As soon as he shouted, a loud voice answered. Then, a team of 100 people separated from the main force and approached the palace. Oh, right, the 4th company is the lowest company of the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Front. It's not the strongest. Wu Sheng said casually when he saw the 4th company respond. This was a low-key show-off. However, He Guang still could not understand the meaning of this sentence. After all, the 4th company had not shown their prowess yet. In his eyes, whether they were the strongest or not was not clear. However, it was only when the real battle began that he understood, especially in the dark night, when he saw the flying flames and deafening gunshots. Most importantly, the scene of people falling to the ground in the depths of the palace shocked him completely. With He Guang's strength, it would not be too difficult for him to eliminate these 500 people. But it would not be so easy. How was this a battle? It was a massacre. Every time a gunshot rang out, there would always be people falling to the ground. It was as if a spell had been cast on them. It was incomparably accurate. Although it was said to take 2 incense sticks time, in just 1 incense sticks time, the king's bedroom was hung with a white flag. There was no other way. In just a short while, more than 200 people had died. They did not even see the enemy's appearance. How were they going to fight this battle? This was clearly not a battle, but a waiting for death. He Guang's face was filled with shock. He wondered what would happen if he were to be the one leading the army. Wu Xing had said that this wasn't their strongest attack. Wu Xing had said that this wasn't their strongest attack. He Guang's face was filled with shock. He wondered what would happen if he were the one leading the army. It seemed that no matter how he thought about it, he could not change the outcome of being slaughtered. He Guang's expression changed drastically. All of this was seen by Wu Sheng from the corner of his eyes. He could not help but laugh. He had already learned from the security bureau that this He Guang would become a general like Hong Jin. If he did not beat him up once and for all and subdue him, it was inevitable that some unexpected problems would occur in the future. Presumably, after experiencing what happened today, He Guang would have to think carefully about any thoughts he had. The white flag was hung high and the gunshot stopped. Then, King Paiyasai walked out under the protection of a group of guards. Let's go. Let's welcome the surrendered king. Hee. This is not the first time we welcome a surrendered king. Of course, it won't be the last. Wu Sheng's heroic voice rang in everyone's ears. Naturally, the cold vanguard soldiers all puffed out their chests and looked proud. He Guang and the others' eyes were also shining. This was a real army, the strongest army. Now they were on the same side. Just thinking about it made them excited. The Grand Preceptor's residence. The banquet was still going on, and it seemed to be very lively. There was no other way. They were already surrounded, and their lives were already in the hands of others. If they did not drink now, when would they? Of course, no one would be stupid enough to really get drunk. After all, to them, drinking at this time was also a kind of mission or even an act. Ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba. Suddenly, concentrated gunshots came from the streets outside the mansion. It was the sound of the 3rd Battalion attacking the treasury, the armory, and the granary. As soon as the gunshots rang out, the banquet hall naturally heard it. Some people could no longer sit still. There was no movement. He could still pretend to be an ostrich and pretend that he did not know anything. However, gunshots rang out. How could he pretend? Mo just suddenly stood up. Because his movements were too big, he actually knocked the pot of wine in front of him to the ground. However, he did not feel it at all. Instead, he looked at Long Qi and said, Lord Imperial Preceptor, are children still playing now? Oh, maybe they're the ones setting off firecrackers. Hearing the gunshots, Long Qi knew that the mercenaries had entered the city. At this moment, Long Qi's heart calmed down. When he looked at Emo Da, he was naturally even more fearless. You're bullshitting. Long Qi's ability to lie with his eyes wide open infuriated Emo Da. He could no longer hold it in and started cursing loudly. Bastard, Emo Da, clean your mouth. Otherwise, I don't mind sealing your mouth. What kind of status did Long Qi have? At this moment, victory was in his grasp. How could he be afraid of the other party's threats and intimidation? You dare. Knowing that there was no way out, Emo Da also showed his ferocity. He did not flare up just now because he also held on to a sliver of hope. That was, without him appearing, the king would be able to solve the problem. But now even gunshots could be heard outside. It was obvious that his hope had turned into a dream. At this moment, he had to rely on himself. Emo Da, who had no way out, decided to show his might and rush out. However, he definitely couldn't beat the guards outside, so he set his target on Long Qi. If he could capture this person alive, perhaps he would have a chance to escape. Protect the Imperial Preceptor. The 6 guards nearby saw that something was wrong with Emo Da's mood. After shouting, they drew their swords and rushed forward. At this moment, Emo Da also rushed over with 4 guards. In an instant, they started fighting, and the banquet became incomparably chaotic. Chapter 590. Clang, clang, clang. 5 against 6. They were actually locked in a stalemate. There was even one time when Emo Da's broadsword almost slashed Long Qi's body, causing him to retreat and shout, "Someone, stop this madman!" There was no need for Long Qi to say anything. A group of soldiers from afar had already rushed over and surrounded Emo Da's group of 5. They looked like they would not be able to escape even if they had wings. Seeing that more and more soldiers were surrounding him, Emo Da's expression became even more unsightly. Knowing that if this continued, he would definitely die here today, he looked at the ministers who had come to attend the banquet and suddenly shouted, "What are you all doing? Can't you see that Long Qi is rebelling? Do you know that it's a felony to not report what you know? Let's not talk about whether he has already given you any benefits. If you fail, have you thought about the consequences?" Emo Da's shout was like a thunderclap that struck the ministers. That's right, the Imperial Advisor's rebellion had already become a fact. But what were they? Which side were they on? Did they agree to rebel? They didn't do that. No one even promised them any benefits. Immediately, many of the ministers stood up and looked at the Imperial Advisor Long Qi, clearly wanting an explanation. Of course, the ministers who could come here would not be alone. They would usually bring 2 guards with them. There were about 50 to 60 officials here, and there were more than 100 guards around them. Moreover, those who could follow their masters were generally experts. As soon as they stood up, the servants who had long heard the commotion and ran over to watch the show became nervous. Some of them even reached out to touch their waists, looking as if they would attack at any time. With so many ministers standing up, Long Qi instinctively stood up and retreated. Although it was true that this was his residence and he had made some arrangements, most of the soldiers were in charge of the periphery. The guards around him were not very strong. Other than the few people who had fought with Emo Da, there were only 2 guards left. Relying on these 2 people to face the attacks of dozens of ministers, Long Qi did not have such a big heart and good mentality. Long Qi kept retreating, showing his inadequacy. The other ministers saw that there was an opportunity to take advantage of and immediately stepped forward step by step. Some of the more straightforward ones had already shouted, "Long Qi, what are you doing?" Were they really going to rebel? But what benefits did the mercenaries give you? Can you share it with us? This was a question and a request for benefits. Obviously, everyone wanted to hear what the Grand Preceptor would say and what kind of conditions he would offer. Only then would they be able to weigh the benefits and make a decision. Facing the questioning of the ministers, Long Qi had a bitter look on his face. He opened his mouth and closed it again. This time, the ministers were gathered because they didn't want them to disrupt the mercenaries' plan to enter the city and take control of the situation. As for the benefits, there really wasn't anything. Although he would receive 5 million taels of silver from the Duke of Loyalty, that was his own fault. He couldn't take it out and share it with everyone. Furthermore, 5 million taels of silver may seem like a lot, but if these people were to be divided, then how much would be left in his hands? Almost no one was willing to spit out the fat meat that was already in their mouth. Naturally, Long Chi would neither. He retreated while looking at the side door behind him, wondering if he could slip away from there. After all, the mercenaries should be here soon. As long as he waited for a while, the situation would be settled. Watch him, don't let him escape. Someone saw the side door behind Long Chi and immediately shouted. Then a few younger officials ran towards the side door, cutting off Long Chi's escape route. Seeing that his thoughts were seen through, Long Chi cursed inwardly. However, because he was older, his speed was limited. It was obviously too late for him to escape. Just as everyone was about to surround Long Chi and demand for an explanation or even openly ask for benefits, a person suddenly walked out from the side door. He was dressed in Han Chinese clothing. He wasn't very tall and looked very ordinary. However, his eyes were too bright. Anyone who saw them would have an unforgettable feeling. The person who came was the third leader of the Security Bureau's Foreign Affairs Department, Yun Quebec. He originally didn't want to come out. After all, the fewer people who knew about his identity, the better. However, he didn't expect that the club-like mod to be so scheming. He knew to use everyone's strength to pressure Long Chi. Seeing that the state preceptor was about to be in danger, he had no choice but to stand out. Otherwise, if Long Chi died here, even if he didn't do it, it was inevitable that people would have such thoughts. This wouldn't be good for them to persuade the ministers of other countries in the future. For the sake of the overall situation, Yun Kei took the initiative to stand out. As soon as he came out, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the ministers of the Lan Tsang Kingdom standing in front of him. Even though he was squinting his eyes, he still gave people a very dangerous feeling. He was like a viper hibernating in the grass, as if he would jump out and hurt people at any time. This feeling made the young courtiers involuntarily step back. What are you doing? What benefits do you want? Why don't you tell me? Since he had already walked out, Yun Kei naturally wanted to have the right to speak. Thus, as he spoke, he found the nearest chair and sat down. Then he played with a small .77 pistol in his hand. Although Skylark had undergone special training when he entered the Security Bureau, he was not arrogant enough to think that he could fight against a group of people. After all, there were dozens of them. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't stand under a dangerous wall. He took out the pistol to protect himself. Of course, it could also be used to intimidate the other party. Who are you? Skylark appeared in front of everyone as if they were nothing and exuded a murderous aura. These ministers couldn't understand him, so they asked hesitantly. Originally, he thought that he was in danger, but he didn't expect Yun Kei to take the initiative to come out. While Long Chi was grateful, his expression also became complacent. You asked who he is? After knowing, don't be scared out of your wits. He is the special envoy sent by the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Special envoy? Listening to Long Chi's introduction, the ministers looked at each other. Then everyone had a look of understanding. It seemed that the state preceptor was indeed in cahoots with the mercenaries. Just now it was just a guess. Now it could be confirmed. This wasn't beyond everyone's expectations. Now, everyone was more concerned about what kind of power this Mr. Special Envoy had. Could it bring them benefits? So soon these ministers quieted down. Then one of them asked, So it's Mr. Special Envoy. But I don't know what kind of benefits you gave the state preceptor to make him work so hard for the Duke of Loyalty and Courage? This was originally a test. Even if Yun Kei didn't answer them, these people couldn't say anything. However, in order to stall for time, Yun Kei decided to answer this question. Do you want to know that much? Well, then this special envoy will tell you. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage gave the state preceptor 5 million taels of silver. I don't know if this is enough. What? 5 million taels. It's actually so much. If I were the state preceptor, I'm afraid I wouldn't refuse. Yes. If it was given to me, I'm afraid I won't be able to spend it all in my lifetime. It must be enough. Hearing Yun Kei's answer, the ministers immediately boiled up. Some of them even completely disregarded their image and unreservedly expressed their envy for the state preceptor. There were even some who directly said that it was enough. Those people couldn't wait to be chosen by the special envoy. Everyone was talking at once. This delayed for a while. Finally, a slightly older and highly respected minister coughed lightly. What are you all doing? Have you all forgotten your own identity? Ah. This reprimand immediately made many of the ministers' faces turn hot. However, this embarrassment only lasted for a moment. In front of benefits who would retreat. What was unexpected was that the elder who reprimanded them just now suddenly changed his tone. Mr. Special Envoy, in fact, we can also help the mercenaries. But I don't know what kind of benefits you can give us. Uft. Hearing this, Skylark almost spat out the tea she had just drunk. He had seen shameless people before, but he had never seen such shameless people. From this point, it could be seen that the treatment of the Lan Song Kingdom's ministers wasn't good. In fact, not only the Lan Song Kingdom, but even the Jiaoji Kingdom and the Great Ming Dynasty's ministers weren't treated well, especially the Great Ming Dynasty. Starting from the time of Zhu Yuanzhang, the treatment and salary of the ministers wasn't high. Thus, in the early days of the Great Ming Dynasty, a large number of corrupt officials appeared. At that time, they couldn't even kill all of them. There was also a very strange thing. That was, the number of people who passed the imperial examinations reached 364. However, in the second year, the number of corrupt officials who were punished also reached 364. In other words, the previous year's imperial examinations all became corrupt officials. This wasn't to say that people were greedy. It was because the salary was too low. It was so low that all the officials couldn't support themselves and their subordinates. Even if they knew the possible consequences of corruption, they still had to do it. In the end, the officials in the early days of the Ming Dynasty were actually not enough. All of this changed in the hands of the other great Ming Dynasty's emperors. But even so, the salary was only enough to live on. Without outside wealth, it was impossible to rely on the salary to make a fortune. In comparison, Yang Qindong was much more generous. The salary that he gave the officials was enough to support their families. It wasn't a problem for them to live a wealthy life. Of course, the anti-corruption aspect was also very strict. I've already given you such good treatment and given you so much power, but you still want more. I'm sorry, but I can only take down greedy people like you and replace you with someone else. Chapter 591. Speaking of which, the ministers of the Lan Song Kingdom looked at Yunk expectantly. Their greedy faces were all exposed. Yunk looked at those greedy faces and wanted to ask, "Do you all have any shame?" But he didn't say it out loud. He only shook his head. "No need. We don't need anyone else's help. Wanqiang City already belongs to the mercenary army. So you don't have the silver. But if you cooperate well, you can still save your lives." Their expectant faces only got them to save their lives. Everyone was instantly unhappy. What was the meaning of this? We are the ministers of the Lan Song Kingdom and have a lot of power in our hands. Even if we can't get 5 million silver taels like the imperial tutor who became the commander of the ministers, we should still be worth 1 million or a few 100,000 silver taels. Now, we aren't even given a single silver tael and only said that we can save our lives. Do you really think that we are weak? Do you really think that we can't do anything if we work together? The angry ministers all had ugly expressions. Some of them not only showed their dissatisfaction on their faces, but they also used their actions to get closer to Yunk. They wanted to capture this envoy and hand him over to His Majesty to receive a reward. At the very least, they could capture him and trade with the mercenary army for a large sum of silver taels. Yunk already expected that these ministers would turn hostile at any time. A cold and murderous aura flashed across his eyes, and he raised his gun. One of the officials who was walking at the front was immediately shot. Blood splashed out from his chest, and then more and more blood flowed out. Finally, he was forced to the point where he lost all strength and fell to the ground with a plop. Without warning, a gunshot rang out, frightening the courtiers who were moving forward. Out of instinct, they stopped moving forward and looked at Skylark and the black pistol in his hand with a dazed expression. With their knowledge, they naturally knew that it should be a gun. But it was the first time they saw such a small gun, especially since the power of this gun wasn't small. One shot could be fatal. While everyone was still in a daze, Yunk had already opened her mouth and said, "I didn't want to deal with you. It was you who wanted to harm me. This is called self-defense, you know? Of course, I still have 50 bullets in this pistol. Now that I've killed one person, I can still kill 49 people. If anyone wants to die, you can come forward and give it a try." It was obviously a lie. The Type 77 pistol only had a capacity of 7 rounds. But Skylark was lying through his teeth, saying that it had a capacity of 50 rounds and was not afraid of being exposed. Not for any other reason, but because he understood people's psychology too well. Everyone was afraid of death, and no one wanted to die. This made it impossible for his lie to be exposed. Sure enough, when they heard that the pistol could fire 50 bullets at once, the faces of the officials changed drastically, although this was somewhat beyond their understanding. And in their imagination, the flintlock had to be reloaded after firing a shot. But looking at Skylark's confident expression, no one really dared to try it. It didn't matter if no one tried it, but there were always people who reacted quickly. Usually, these people wouldn't rush to the front of everything. So in order to see if what Skylark said was true, a smart official who still wanted to control the other side said, "Don't listen to his nonsense. How can there be such a powerful gun in the world? Come, let's go together and see what he's going to do." As he spoke, he pushed the waist of one of his colleagues who was caught off guard. That person was caught off guard and rushed forward. Bang! Another gunshot sounded, and that person fell to the ground. He didn't immediately die, but he didn't look at Skylark sitting there. Instead, he looked back and wanted to see who pushed him. He wanted to F***CK, this person's 8 generations of ancestors. Sure enough, it can fire continuously. There were still some officials who reacted a bit slower. They didn't pay attention to how someone had the guts to test the gun. They only saw that the gun was indeed not reloaded before it fired a second shot. I don't believe he can really fire 50 shots. It was still that person who spoke, and then he pushed the other 2 officials beside him. Bang, bang! A series of gunshots sounded, and another 2 people fell to the ground. It was only a dozen meters away, so Skylark didn't need to aim at all. He only needed to shoot based on his intuition, and he could hit the target. It really is a good gun. Hey! No, those 2 people, just now, seemed to have been pushed by someone. The officials finally reacted and finally felt that something was wrong. Immediately, they turned around and looked, and then one by one, they put up a defensive look. 3 scapegoats had already been pushed out, and no one could guarantee that they wouldn't be the next one. For safety reasons, of course, it was better to stay as far away from others as possible. For people had already died, and everyone had a clearer understanding of the gun in Skylark's hand. Really, no one dared to try it, so the smart people couldn't find scapegoats, even if they wanted to. At this moment, the situation was deadlocked. Haha, it's so lively. A series of dense footsteps entered everyone's ears, and then a group of soldiers in military green camouflage clothes poured into the Grand Tutor's residence in rows. The one who spoke first was a young man who seemed to have a somewhat scholarly temperament. As these soldiers entered, the Lansong soldiers who were originally responsible for the safety of the Grand Tutor's residence all nervously retreated. Naturally, they had already received the notice that the mercenaries would be coming, but when they really faced them, a strong sense of pressure arose, causing them to have no choice but to retreat. Mercenaries? Is he the loyal duke? When the cold vanguard entered the courtyard, it naturally attracted everyone's attention. Then someone shouted, and then everyone looked at the leader, 2nd Battalion Commander Chin Bo, with astonishment. Because of the lack of information, not many people in the Lansong Kingdom had seen Yang Qindong before. Unfortunately, some people were lucky enough to see him, but they didn't come back, and this made him a legend. He was young, and he used to be a scholar. This was the most direct impression of him. Chan Bo was very young, and he had a scholarly temperament, so it was no wonder that everyone had such an impression of him and mistook him for the Ming dynasty's loyal duke. Originally, when he heard someone shouting the loyal duke's name, Chin Bo was also startled, thinking that the 6th young master had come here first. However, when he thought about it carefully, he realized that it was impossible. There was no need for him to take such a risk. When he saw that everyone's gaze was focused on him, he immediately smiled and said, "Everyone, the battalion commander, Chin Bo, is much younger than me." "What? How can he be younger than you?" Seeing Chan Bo deny that he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage and say that the true Duke of Loyalty was even younger, the officials in the courtyard were all shocked. In fact, Chin Bo wasn't lying. According to his real age, he was older than Yang Qindong by 3 years. Of course, this wasn't the main point at this time. He had already seen Yun Kei in the crowd and immediately showed a smile and greeted from afar, "Leader Yin." Yun Kei also saw Chin Bo when he and the others entered the courtyard, and he had already stood up from his chair. "Political Commissar Chin, congratulations on your promotion." Chan Bo was no longer a battalion cadre, but a regimental commander with the actual position of political commissar. But for these ruthless people who were used to killing enemies on the battlefield, they seemed to like commanding the army and preferred to be with the frontline army. From this point, Chan Bo preferred to be called battalion commander and not political commissar. But who was Yun Kei? He was the backbone of the security bureau, and he had heard this name from the 6th young master more than once. This was someone that the 6th young master valued highly, and he wasn't part of the military system, so he should be more polite. "Leader Yin, you must be joking. My political commissar position is just a title." "Haha, that's because political commissar Chin doesn't care about empty titles. He has noble character and unquestionable integrity." Skylark laughed. He was worried that someone would take the risk. His pistol had already fired 4 bullets. At most, he could fire 3 more shots. Although it wouldn't take long to change the magazine, who could say that there wouldn't be any accidents? But now the mercenaries were here, and it was the strongest Lung Feng. He could finally rest assured and leave the situation here to the Lung Feng to handle. The two of them talked as if there was no one around, as if they didn't put anyone else in their eyes. However, the other Lung Feng didn't stay idle. They went forward and grabbed the ministers of the Lansong Kingdom one by one, and once they encountered the slightest resistance, they would beat them up without mercy. If these people were Han officials, perhaps the Lung Feng would be more lenient, but sorry, they didn't have such rights if they were foreigners. Several people were beaten up because they were too slow to crouch down, and the others learned from their mistakes. They cooperated well, and the situation was quickly under control. "Leader Yin, you know the situation here better. Let's see how to deal with it." "Okay." Yun Kei nodded without any trace of politeness. The Lung Feng was naturally good at fighting, but when it came to seeing through people's hearts and gathering intelligence, they were far inferior to the Security Bureau. For example, he had a list of names in his hands, which showed the wealth of the captured ministers. Other than Long Qi and He Guang, the other ministers were naturally not so lucky. The situation was set. They didn't work hard before and wanted to hug the thick thighs afterwards. Sorry, it was all too late. Yun Kei had already received Yang Chendong's secret order to confiscate the wealth of the Lan Tsang Kingdom's ministers. Of course, he wouldn't be lenient at this moment. In order to make things go smoothly, he first set his eyes on Mo Da. Mo Da still had some strength. At least he didn't die in the fight just now. He only suffered a knife wound. Seeing the mercenaries appear, he knew that the situation was over. He took the initiative to tuck his tail between his legs, lowered his head, and blended into the crowd. Chapter 592. General Mo, you don't have to hide anymore. Stand out. Arriving in front of the captured ministers, Skylark had a smile on his face as he pointed at Mo Da, who was squeezing into the crowd with his head lowered. When his name was called out, Tu Lung Feng immediately grabbed him and pressed him in front of Skylark. What are you doing? I surrender. I surrender. In the future, I am willing to be a loyal and courageous duke. I am willing to be a mercenary's dog. Please don't kill me. The weakness of human nature was finally exposed. Originally, he still dared to shout a few words in front of the imperial advisor, but the moment he saw the mercenaries, he was completely terrified. Skylark naturally wouldn't put this kind of person who bullied the weak and feared the strong in his eyes. As for the other party saying that he wanted to be a loyal and courageous duke's dog, he was very sorry, but such a person didn't have the qualifications. All right, you don't have to shout. Whether you can survive or not depends on how much you are willing to pay. We have also investigated your family background. How about this? In 3 days, take out 400,000 taels of silver, and you can live. Otherwise, you will die. The survey showed that Mo Da's private property was about 350,000 taels of silver. The extra 50,000 taels was what Skylark meant. How could you know what kind of potential some people had if you didn't squeeze it out? What? For 100,000 taels? I don't have it. When he heard this number, Mo Da shook his head vigorously. No one knew better than him how much money he had. He definitely doesn't have 400,000 taels of silver. No. Could it be that our intelligence was wrong? Skylark said in a surprised voice, if one understood his subordinates, they would definitely know that the leader was preparing to scam them. How could Mo Da know about this? He just wanted to bleed less, so he cooperated and said, yes, your intelligence must be wrong. I can only take out 10,000 taels of silver at most. This is already my family background. When he shouted for Do-E to cry out for injustice, those who didn't know would really think that Mo Da only had this much money and was a great, honest official. Bam! A kick suddenly landed on Mo Da's body. We were wrong. How could we be wrong? It's obvious that you have the money, but don't want it. All right, since you're willing to give up your life for money, I'll fulfill your wish. Men, chop off one of his arms as a warning. If he still doesn't repent, then his limbs. No, after all of his limbs are broken, kill him, and then go to his residence to search and confiscate his property. Skylark seemed to smile at everyone he met, but he was actually very vicious. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been entrusted with such a heavy responsibility by the Security Bureau. She couldn't be too soft-hearted when doing this kind of work. As soon as he finished speaking, Lung Feng took out a steel saber and landed it on Mo Da's left arm. The blade rose and fell, accompanied by the sound of Maud shouting, "Ouch, it hurts so much." Come, let me ask you, do you have 400,000 taels? Skylark ignored the other party's shouts and continued to ask. No, at most 200,000 taels. Mo Da was still insisting. He believed that the other party wanted money and not his life, so he gritted his teeth and persevered. He wanted to save some money for himself. You're still not honest. Cut off your left leg as well. Skylark didn't have the slightest intention of wasting his breath. He had already decided to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. He wanted the other ministers to see what would happen if they wanted money and not their lives. Shwa! His left leg was chopped off as well. Another blood-curdling scream rang out. At this moment, Emode struggled in pain twice before fainting. He fainted. Yeah, maybe this is the best outcome. The other Lansong ministers squatted on the ground and watched this scene. They didn't forget to discuss it in private. In their eyes, it was better for Emode to faint than to be awake. After all, he still had to suffer, even if he was awake. Fainted? Hee, do you think you'll be fine like this? Someone, wake him up with cold water. Either take the money or give up your life. You have to choose one. Skylark chuckled and casually instructed. A bucket of cold water was poured down on Emode's head and he woke up. When he looked at Skylark, it was as if he was looking at a devil. He repeatedly shouted, I have 400,000 taels, I can borrow it. Sai, is that right? Someone, stop General Mo's bleeding. We can't let him die before we get the money. Skylark chuckled, as if he was very satisfied. Then he drew a line with the brush in his hand, then looked at the Lansong Kingdom's ministers who were squatting on the ground, and casually said, Come, next, Lord Qian Yuliang, who is in charge of the treasury. Plop! As soon as he finished speaking, one of the people in the crowd fell to the ground in fright. Who else could it be but Qian Yuliang? But no matter how he reacted, he couldn't escape the result of being brought to Skylark for questioning. If one wanted to know what the result was, they would naturally have to pay for their lives. Otherwise, Emode's fate would be right in front of them. They didn't want to lower their heads after being cut a few times. That would just be looking for trouble. State Preceptor Long Chi saw this scene with his eyes. Cold sweat unknowingly flowed down the back of his neck. At this moment, he was very glad. He was glad that Skylark didn't look for anyone else but himself. He was glad that he tactfully agreed to the other party's request. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would have lost both his life and money. The heart-to-heart talk, or rather, the interrogation, continued. After questioning one person, Tu Lungfeng accompanied him and left. 3 days later, these people would either take out the money or pay with their lives. Under the pressure, who would think about the transfer of power? Who would care about the life and death of the king? This also made the following process very smooth. That night, the 3 battalions separately attacked the Lansong Kingdom's treasury, armory, and granary. Early the next morning, the gunshots in the city finally stopped. Some brave citizens walked out of their houses and found that everything was very peaceful. There wasn't any difference from before. If there was a difference, it would be that on the streets, one could hear the sounds of cursing coming from an official's residence. Also, one could see soldiers in green military uniforms patrolling the streets with the king's guards. With the experience of taking down Haniai City, it wasn't so complicated to deal with Wanxiang City. First, confiscate the property, then stabilize the situation. After that, all they had to do was wait for the 6th young master to bring the knowledgeable youths from Qiqian City to take over this place. King Paiyasai was placed under house arrest in a small courtyard. His food and drink were all sent to him. He had completely lost his freedom. Originally, the king still had a glimmer of hope. When the sun rose, he thought that there would be some loyal subjects coming to save him. However, after waiting from morning till night, there was no movement at all. He knew that he, the king, had been abandoned by his subjects. How would he know that all the subjects were now raising money to buy their own lives? How would they have the time to care about the lives of others? Even if he was the king, he was also thrown to the back of their minds. The occupied granaries started to sell rice. Once the people had something to eat, they became very obedient. The situation in the city stabilized. 3 days later, some of the subjects handed over the ransom. In order to survive, they really used all kinds of methods. Apart from the houses that Lung Feng had told them to confiscate, they sold everything else that they could. Some of them even sold their own concubines just to save up enough money to survive. Fortunately, those who could become subjects often had the support of some people behind them. It wasn't too difficult to borrow money from them. Therefore, more than 80% of the subjects handed over enough money in the stipulated time and didn't have to worry about their lives. Of course, there were also 20% who didn't have that much money. Yunk naturally wouldn't be polite. Since he said it, he had to do it. Otherwise, how could he intimidate others? Immediately, those people had their limbs chopped off and were hung on the city gate tower. This scene made many of the subjects feel that it was a close call. 3 days later, Yunk had an extra 14 million taels of silver in his hands. Most of this was provided by the subjects. A small amount was obtained from the Lan Tsang kingdom's treasury. From this point, it could be seen that any country had some foundation. A small Wanxiang city could squeeze out 10 million taels of silver. What if it was the entire Lan Tsang kingdom? What if the target was the Great Ming dynasty? Just like the end of the Great Ming dynasty, there was no money in the treasury. All the money was in the hands of the subjects and merchants. This caused the country to have no money to raise an army. In the end, it was destroyed by slave Jian. Then, in order to save their lives, the subjects and merchants took out an unknown amount of gold and silver to give to slave Jian. This also caused Emperor Chongjin, who knew all of this, to shout before he died, "Kill all the subjects." Now that he thought about it, it did make some sense. On the 5th day, the main force of the mercenary army finally arrived at Wanxiang City. Accompanying them were 50,000 young men who had long been prepared. They would use their knowledge to infect everyone around them so that they could become a member of the Yang family as soon as possible. In the Lan Tsang Kingdom's palace, Yang Qindong summoned Captain Wu Shang, Yunk, and the others. After listening to their reports, he nodded his head in satisfaction and praised them. After Yunk reported that they obtained 14 million taels of silver, Yang Qindong laughed out loud. "See, wealth comes so quickly in war. Hee, since that is the case, we still need 3 million taels of silver from Long Qi. Just give it to him. As for the remaining 1 million taels, take out 200,000 taels to reward the Laotian mercenaries in River Light and 800,000 taels to reward the subjects who contributed greatly in this war. 10 million taels of silver will go into the treasury and be used to build the infrastructure of Lao province." Great! Yang Qindong had already thought of changing the Lan Tsang kingdom to Lao province. After Vietnam, the Yang family had another province, and it was not considered small. Everyone naturally agreed in unison. However, it was obvious that the second Captain Luo Pa and the third Captain Wu Shang were a little distracted, as if they had something to say. Yang Qindong sat high up, so he naturally could see more clearly. He called out, "Captain Luo, Captain Wu, do you have something to say?" Chapter 593. Sixth Young Master, now that the Lan Tsang Kingdom has been destroyed, who are we going to destroy next? The two commanders asked excitedly. It was obvious that they were addicted to the war. "Ha ha ha, it depends on the situation." "Oh right, is there any news about Fan Yuhai from the Security Bureau?" Yang Qindong laughed. He liked the morale of his subordinates. However, food had to be taken one bite at a time. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to finish the second bite, they would also vomit the first bite. Yunk, who had been prepared for this question, replied respectfully, "Sixth Young Master, there is information that after Fan Yuhai was defeated in Sangnu City, he took 5,000 elite cavalry to Siam. Siam was a title given by the Ming dynasty. They called themselves the Ming dynasty, which was the current Thailand. Oh haha. This Fan Yuhai knows what I want to do. Sigh, I can't bear to kill such a person." Yang Qindong couldn't help but smile. This person seemed to be afraid that he didn't have enough territory and could always find a new enemy for the mercenaries to conquer. There was an excuse again. Yang Qindong was all smiles. "Then arrange for someone to go to Siam and ask them to hand over Fan Yuhai. Otherwise, they will have to bear the consequences. During this time, we have to divide the land among the rich and stabilize the situation in Lao province." We have to speed up the communication between Lao Province and Vietnam so that they can communicate with each other. The mercenaries shouldn't be idle either. Eliminate the opposing forces in Lao Province as soon as possible. In short, before we attack other countries, we have to stabilize this place. If we don't achieve this goal, the 2nd and 3rd Regiments won't participate in the next war. Please be at ease, 6th Young Master. We will definitely resolve the problem here in the shortest time possible. Luo Pe and Wu Sheng replied with an anxious look on their faces when they heard this. Following the 6th Young Master meant that they could fight wars, eat meat, and be promoted quickly. Right now, it was just that the requirements for Lung Feng's assessment were a little too high. Once they had enough soldiers, they would most likely have the qualifications to become division commanders. If they were really forced to stay here because of the security issues in Laos, wouldn't they miss out on a great opportunity? This was something they absolutely could not allow to happen. Crimson City. More than 4 million Han Chinese had settled down here. An entire Ryukyu Island had been unified. The development of the entire island also began to speed up, especially Crimson City, which was the center of political, cultural, economic, and scientific development. It was a scene of prosperity. With Yang Qindong's approval, Chichen City had nearly doubled in size. In terms of size, it was almost half the size of Beiming's capital, but it was still barely enough to supply the merchants and trade routes of the entire country. As a result, many factories began to expand at a faster pace. Whether it was the factories or the workers, they were increasing exponentially. Luan Shaoqin, as an outstanding political teacher, had a lot of work to do. With so many new people joining, whether it was ideological work or teaching them how to read and write, he was so busy that he felt like he did not have enough time. However, he did not complain at all. Instead, he worked tirelessly. In the words of his parents and sister, he was still young, so there was nothing wrong with working and learning more. Otherwise, when he was old, he would not have so much energy to learn. Even though he could only sleep about 6 hours a day because of how busy he was, Luan Shaoqin did not slack off at all. This was because he knew how much attention the Luan family had attracted, and many people were jealous of them. His father, Luan Qi, was the factory manager of the power plant. His mother, Zhou Hua, was the director of the main garment factory. Just the workers in the few factories under her command added up to more than 100,000 people. One could imagine how much power she had. However, they could not compare to his sister, Luan Xiaoyu. At that time, she was the head of Crimson City's propaganda department. Whenever she had free time, she would go to the palace that everyone in Crimson City admired to accompany the 6th Young Master's 3 wives. Sometimes she would even spend the night there. There was news that when Luan Xiaoyu turned 18, she would become the new wife of the 6th Young Master. The wife of the 6th Young Master, how noble was that? Just based on this, the Luan family did not need to do anything and could still eat and drink well. It was also because of Luan Xiaoyu's existence that even City Lord Yu Qian and the 2 military commanders, Lung Song and Gao Xiong, would be very polite when they met the Luan family. Because of this, although some people were envious, they did not dare to do anything jealous. Under this kind of pressure, Luan Shaoqin's efforts seemed so ordinary. It seemed that everyone thought that this person could have his current position. Not long ago, Yang Qindong personally promoted him from a battalion-level instructor to a deputy regiment-level political commissar. That was not the result of his own efforts, but because of his sister, Luan Xiaoyu. However, this could not dispel his passion for work and private efforts. Under the strong pressure, Luan Shaoqin just went to the unit in the morning. He was about to bring people to do political work for the new citizens when someone came to his office. As soon as this person entered the political department building, the whole atmosphere changed. Many people who were originally in a rush walked a little slower. Then their constant greetings resounded in the corridor. "Fifth brother, fifth brother." "Hello, everyone." The person also smiled and greeted everyone politely. Then he came to Luan Xiaochen's office. At this moment, Luan Xiaochen was assigning today's tasks to several subordinates. Because his back was facing the door, he didn't see anyone coming behind him. He was still arranging some things by himself. It wasn't until he noticed that his subordinates were looking behind him that he realized something was wrong. He turned around to look. When he turned around, he saw Yang Wu standing in the corridor. He immediately smiled and said, "Fifth brother is here." Fifth brother was Yang Wu. He was one of Yang Qindong's most trusted servants. He was also his trusted aide in Qiqian City. Normally, he was in charge of the safety of the three madams. However, he secretly had the authority to investigate all the officials and military officers. After all, Yang Qindong was not in Qiqian City most of the time. This was his headquarters, and he could not afford to lose it. Yang Wu's status was somewhat aloof. So much so that if he found out there was a problem, he had the authority to act first and report later. In terms of the effectiveness of dealing with officials, even Yu Qian, Lung Song, and Gao Xiong couldn't compare. In principle, he could even investigate the three of them. Of course, the three of them also had the authority to monitor Yang Wu. This was mutual supervision. With his aloof status, Yang Wu became the most popular person in Qiqian City. No matter where he appeared, he would naturally cause a storm. Many times, following his appearance, who knew how many corrupt officials would fall off their horses. Of course, they came to see Luan Xiaochen today, not to investigate him. This was something that everyone had reached a consensus on. What a joke! His sister was the future wife of the sixth young master. That meant that she would be Yang Wu's future mistress. No matter how bold he was, he would not dare to touch the mistress's brother without asking for permission. "Xiaochen, don't be busy. The young master has given an order," Yang Wu said with a smile on his face. He had a good impression of Luan Xiaochen. He clearly had the qualifications to be a silk pants, but he did things with propriety. He would not do things that should not be done by him. If everyone was like this, his job would be much easier. The young master has given an order. Since it was the young master that Yang Wu spoke of, only Yang Qindong could take on the responsibility. Knowing this, Luan Xiaochen became a lot more serious. He stood at attention, puffed out his chest, and raised his head, waiting for the order to be given. Yang Wu also became a lot more serious. He opened his mouth and said, "The young master has given an order. From today onwards, Luan Xiaochen will be the governor of Lao province. Immediately hand over the work in your hands. 3 days later, you will take the ship to take up the post. 1452 AD, 3rd month, 20th day." After saying this with a serious face, Yang Wu's smile returned to his face. "Congratulations, Xiaochen." Luan Xiaochen was still in shock and had not recovered. How did he become the governor of a province? And what did Lao province mean? Why hadn't he heard of it before? Seeing that Luan Xiaochen was still in shock, Yang Wu seemed to know what he was thinking. He smiled and explained, "Lao province is the Lan Song kingdom. The young master had just led his troops to conquer it. In the future, it will be one of our provinces, just like Yunnan province. There are a lot of things waiting to be done. There will be room for you, Xiaochen, to perform, hee." The news of the Lan Song kingdom's destruction had not been officially announced. Many people did not know. Now that it was announced by Yang Wu, naturally no one would doubt it. However, it still caused a huge uproar. It had been less than 2 months since the sixth young master left Qiqian City, and he actually destroyed another country. Their sixth young master was really powerful. The voices of other people were still ringing in his ears. Luan Xiaochen was already shocked by this appointment, although it could be said that the political department had become a behemoth like the military, especially the political assessment of officers and soldiers. This department's power had become more and more powerful. However, there were also a lot of talents here. It was too difficult to stand out here, and it was even more difficult to achieve results. However, if he could go to Laos to be the governor, it would be completely different. One must know that Laos was an independent place, and it was a newly conquered place. Although everything had to be started from scratch, this was the value of it. It was like a blank piece of paper, and it was easier to create beautiful scenery. It was not an exaggeration to say that once there was such an opportunity, most people would fight to the death. There was a saying that one would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Unfortunately, he only had a lot of ambition, and there was no room for him to display his talent. After all, there was only Yunnan province before. That place had already been occupied, and people had lost hope. Now that Laos had just been conquered, the 6th young master's order was given. The intention of training was very obvious. How could Luan Shaoqin, who was originally smart, not understand the reason behind it? Chapter 594. Congrats, congrats! While his mind was still filled with shock and excitement from this new information, he heard a familiar voice. Mo Qingyu and Ji Fei had appeared in front of him at some point. These two were members of the political department. Mo Qingyu was also the political commissar of the 1st Division of Lungfeng, while Ji Fei was the political commissar of the 1st Division of the Navy. Both of them were people of high status and power. They were in the same office today. When they heard that Yang Wu was here, they came out of courtesy and heard the order. They immediately understood that the 6th young master was here to help his brother-in-law. The two of them immediately came out to congratulate him. Committee member Mo, committee member Ji. Looking at the two, Luan Shaoqin habitually saluted them. Haha, good, good. After all, Shaoqin is still a member of the political department. Now that you have made a name for yourself, you are the glory of our department. Tonight, committee member Ji and I will hold a farewell banquet for you. You must come. Mo Qingyu laughed and used this opportunity to improve his relationship with Luan Shaoqin. Although he was the #1 committee member in the department, in reality he was not much different from the other 3 committee members. If he wanted to have real power, he would have to become a vice minister. If he wanted to achieve this goal, he would need more people to support him. If Luan Shaoqin was willing to support him at the critical moment, it would be a great help. TL note: Yang Qindong is the minister of the Ministry of Defense. Yes, we're representing the department. Shaoqin won't refuse, right? Ji Fei obviously understood the reason behind it and said with a smile. The 6th young master only gave him 3 days. If he did not make the first move, then he would not have a chance to improve their relationship. Facing the enthusiasm of the 2 superiors, Luan Shaoqin could not refuse. He could only look at Yang Wu, who had come to deliver the order. When Yang Wu came, he was not only following the young master's order, he was also following the orders of the 3 matriarchs. Naturally, he had to take care of Luan Shaoqin. He nodded and said, since it is the department's good intentions, Shaoqin should not refuse. Oh, right, tomorrow night, the 3 matriarchs and department head Luan will be holding a farewell banquet for Little Li. Don't miss the appointment. Naturally, Yang Wu was expressing his attitude. Tomorrow's meeting had already been decided, so other people should not have any ideas. This was also for Luan Shaoqin's sake. As for why he allowed Luan Shaoqin to get closer to Mo Qingyu and Ji Guang, it was to get more support from them. This time, Luan Shaoqin was not going to Laos alone. He was going with 50,000 educated youths from Kikian City. How good these people were, and whether they could bring some elites with them were under the jurisdiction of the political department. It was the best of both worlds to decide on the personnel by building a good relationship with them. Okay, I'll listen to 5th brother. Luan Shaoqin smiled. Obviously, he already understood the other party's intention. If Luan Shaoqin didn't have the strength, why would Yang Qindong vigorously promote him? One had to know that Luan Shaoqin had just celebrated his 18th birthday. At such a young age, he was already the head of a province, a high-ranking official of a region. This was probably very rare in history. This news was also immediately sent to department head Luan Xiaoyu's ears. Hearing the news from her trusted aide, Luan Xiaoyu's face was full of pride. In her mind, the image of her big brother who hugged her the first time they met appeared. Now, she only hoped that she could grow up quickly and use her life to repay this benefactor of the Luan family. Luan Xiaoqin's matter became a hot topic in Kikian City. At the same time, it gave more youths hope. Since Luan Xiaoqin, who had just turned 18, could become a high-ranking official, did that not mean that they also had hope? Although he had benefited from his sister's light, his youth was still a fact. This made many youths work even harder. Everyone hoped that good luck would fall on them in the future. In fact, everyone had forgotten that Yang Qindong's true age was only 22 years old. It was just that his achievements were too dazzling, to the point that everyone had chosen to forget about it. Luan Xiaoqin did not disappoint, using the banquet that night to recruit many elites. This would be a huge help to him in the future. With Yang Wu's appearance, the others did not have the chance to disturb Luan Xiaoqin. Instead, they allowed him to spend more time with his family. After all, outside Kikian City was the outside world. As the head of a province, he could not leave without orders. Who knew when the next meeting would be? 3 days later, Luan Xiaoqin set off on time. Along with him were 50,000 youths, as well as 2 auxiliary battalions that had just passed the background check and training. As the population of Kikian City increased, the number of militia also increased. According to the rules, once the militia had served for over half a year and passed the background check, they would be able to join the auxiliary army. This was also due to the change in the situation. After all, the more places they conquered, the more soldiers they would need. Of course, more did not mean less. The examination was still very strict, especially the background check. Who knew how many people were rejected? After all, once they left Kikian City, if these people did not keep their mouths shut and spread the news, who knew what kind of problems it would cause? On this point, the political department played a huge role, and the publicity department also put in a lot of effort. In their programs, they had already treated Yang Qindong as a god. This was how the title of God, Young Master, came about. It was also because the background check was very strict that no one knew about the situation in Kikian City. Even the great Ming dynasty did not know who the real leader of the mercenaries was. Thinking about it, so many people had left Kikian City in the past year, but there was no news at all. It had to be said that this was a miracle. In Lao Province, Luan Xiaoqin arrived on time. As soon as he entered, he was taken away by the first security team to see Yang Qindong. Afterwards, the 6th young master gave many constructive suggestions on how to manage this place. After the siege of Hanoi City in Vietnamese province, Yang Qindong did not want such a thing to happen again. As such, his requirements for Luan Xiaoqin were that the foundation had to be firm, the people's livelihood had to be improved, the military had to be strong, and the economy had to be prosperous. The foundation had to be firm. There were 2 main aspects. The first was the hearts of the people. They could not let the people have any negative feelings towards them. The second was the infrastructure. Whether it was building houses or repairing cement roads, they had to be stable and fast. On this point, Kikian City would provide support in terms of manpower, resources, and money. The people's livelihood had to be improved. There were also 2 aspects. The first was to build trenches and distribute farmland. As long as the people had farmland and a place to live, they would become obedient and cooperate. Of course, those landlords and rich gentry who did not cooperate would be captured and sent to Kikian City for reform. That place was surrounded by the sea, and it was a good place to turn over a new leaf. The second was the taxes of the people. If the taxes were high, the income of the people would decrease, and it would affect their lives. How to increase the income of the people while increasing their income at the same time. For example, they could be hired to repair roads and houses. With work, the people would have money and their hearts would be stable. The military had to be strong. This referred to the militia system in Kikian City. It was not that everyone was a soldier, but at the very least, the young men had to serve in the militia. With military skills, once something happened, they would not have to worry about mobilizing soldiers. In order to make everyone more motivated, they could reduce the militia's taxes. For example, if a family had a militia and they performed well, they could reduce their taxes by a certain amount. In this way, they wouldn't have to worry about not having enough soldiers. The economy had to be prosperous. This referred to the need to liven up business. Just like Hanoi City in Vietnam, they had to create a commercial street and slowly expand it. In the end, it would lead all the businesses in the vicinity to have a commercial street in every city. As the saying went, without commerce, there would be no rich country, and this was the principle. Under Yang Qindong's careful guidance, Luan Shaochen memorized the instructions in the book, which gave him a general understanding of the work in the future. Next, he only needed to do it one by one. When a problem appeared, he would solve it one by one. His experience would become better and better, and his ability would become stronger and stronger. After recording these problems, Luan Shaochen asked a more daring question. That was, should the expansion continue? Of course, he was not against expansion. Under the ideological and political education, the people from Kikian City knew that Yang Qindong had to send out troops to destroy one country after another in order to save more people. However, continuous expansion would also bring some hidden dangers. For example, the instability of the rear. If this problem could not be solved, once a problem occurred, it would be a big problem. It meant that many people who had just seen hope would once again fall into endless war and return to a life of poverty. This was not what Yang Qindong wanted. Luan Shaochen thought about it all the way on the ship before asking this question. He didn't even know if he would incur Yang Qindong's wrath after saying this. But since Yang Qindong trusted him so much, he had to say whatever was in his heart. This was what it meant to repay a debt of gratitude. To Luan Shaochen's surprise, Yang Qindong was not angry. Instead, he laughed and said, I know what you are thinking. Don't worry, without a stable foundation, there will not be too much expansion for the time being. Of course, if you want to liberate more people with this young master and let more people live a better life, then you should build up Laos as soon as possible. Chapter 595. After saying this, Yang Qindong patted Luan Shaochen's shoulder. How could he not know that a weak foundation had become the biggest obstacle to expansion? Just like what Luan Shaochen was worried about, if the rear wasn't stable and the front was still fighting, the consequences would be unimaginable. Regarding this, he naturally knew. Even without Luan Shaochen's reminder, he had to stabilize and build a foundation first. Of course, if possible, he would fight 2 more battles to serve as a deterrent, so that he could gain more time and space for development. But he would not tell Luan Shaochen all of this for the time being. In fact, there was still a problem involved in the assessment. Yang Qindong stopped for more than a month. He had to wait for the Security Bureau to send the latest news about Fan Yuhai. He had to wait for Lung Feng and the auxiliary soldiers to completely pacify Laos with the cooperation of General Higuang. During this time, the news of Lansong Kingdom being taken down by the mercenaries finally passed through the rainforest and reached Bai Ming, Southern Ming, and King Min's factions. Among the 3 factions, the one with the biggest reaction was the Emperor of Southern Ming, Zhu Qijin. Bai Ming was far away and couldn't take care of it. Even if they were angry, they could only choose to ignore it. King Min was still consolidating his position, learning from Southern Ming. He was also recruiting and training soldiers. However, he couldn't stop Yang Qindong from growing stronger. Southern Ming was different. This country originally belonged to Zhu Qijin. In his opinion, whether it was Bai Ming's Zhu Qiyu or King Min's Zhu Huituan, they were all his family's thieves. They were the ones who stole his wealth and territory. However, no matter what, their fight was his family's business, and the mercenaries were his enemies. With such a mentality, when he heard that the mercenaries had taken down Lansong Kingdom after destroying Jiaoji, he was naturally furious. He was furious in the palace. Even though the only one who told him was the chief eunuch, Chao Jixiang, he was still furious. What is he trying to do? Doesn't he know that Lansong Kingdom is also one of the countries that Emperor Taizu set not to conquer? Doesn't he know that Lansong Kingdom is also the Laos protectorate of Great Ming? What reason does he have to occupy it just like that? He roared like a madman, not caring about how terrifying he looked at this moment. After shouting this, Zhu Qijin looked at Chao Jixiang and asked loudly, "Great partner, what's his reason?" "Your Majesty." Chao Jixiang's face was filled with apprehension, as if he was shocked by the emperor's might. However, from the way he answered the question, it could be seen that he was not truly afraid. Not long ago, the Lansong Kingdom sent out tens of thousands of troops to attack Hanoi City together with the famous general of Jiaoji, Fan Yuhai. However, they did not manage to take it down. However, I heard that many of the mercenaries died in this battle. Is there such a thing? Zhu Qijin acted as if he didn't know anything. In fact, when this news was reported, he clapped his hands in joy. In his opinion, the loss of the mercenaries was a good thing. At least it proved that they were human and could die. But now, he didn't want to think about it at all. Instead, after hearing Chao Jixiang's answer, he said with disappointment, "This Penjasset is really too much. Why did he provoke the mercenaries and give them an excuse to attack?" Sigh. This sigh showed Zhu Qijin's attitude. He could only pinch his nose and admit to this matter. In fact, he could not admit it. Who told the mercenaries to become the victors? The victors had the right to do anything with a condescending attitude. "Your Majesty, this subject has something to say." Seeing that Zhu Qijin's anger seemed to have subsided, Chao Jixiang tried to speak. "Great partner, if you have something to say, then say it. We forgive you. Thank you, Your Majesty. In fact, Your Majesty, the mercenaries' current actions are not a bad thing for us. The bigger their territory, the more people they will send in, and the less mobile forces they will have. When they expand to a certain extent, their foundation will inevitably become unstable. At that time, our new army should have finished training, and it will be time for a large-scale counterattack. At that time, as long as we defeat the mercenaries, wouldn't everything they have now become the Great Mings and Your Majesties in the future?" Chao Jixiang observed Zhu Qijin's expression as he spoke. As a eunuch, his job was to solve the emperor's problems. Therefore, restoring the emperor's confidence was one of his duties as the head of the eunuchs. Zhu Qijin seriously considered Chao Jixiang's words. After a while, his dark expression finally cleared up and he smiled. "That's right, great partner is right. As long as we become strong and can defeat the mercenaries, then what they have will be ours in the future." "Ha. Right. We're going to train the new army with all our strength. As long as the army is strong enough, who would dare to oppose us?" Ha. As if he had thought it through, Zhu Qijin was no longer angry about this matter. He didn't even send someone to reprimand Yang Qindong on the surface. Instead, he put all his energy into training the new army. He even took out 3 million taels of silver from the national treasury for this. Through trading people, the Southern Ming Empire really did have some savings. Bai Ming was too far away and couldn't participate in anything. The Southern Ming Empire had its own little plans. Due to its own strength, it had to admit everything. As for Min Wang, while stabilizing the foundation, he had some thoughts. For example, he wanted to try to contact Yang Qindong. However, Zhu Huiming's thoughts were quickly dissuaded by his officials. According to these officials, now that the mercenaries were in the limelight, it would be difficult to gain any benefits by allying with them. It was better to wait for them to lose due to their arrogance. At that time, the price to pay for allying with them would be much lower. Following the advice of his officials, Zhu Huiming focused on stabilizing the territory and didn't send anyone to contact the mercenaries. The few major powers in the north didn't make any movements. All of this was within Yang Qindong's expectations. However, the few countries around Laos didn't make any movements at all. This made him somewhat puzzled. Logically speaking, since the mercenaries were so powerful, the Ava dynasty, Myanmar, in the northwest, Siam, Thailand in the west, and the Phnom Penh dynasty, Cambodia, in the south should also have some reaction. At the very least, they should have sent someone to contact him. They should have either acknowledged the mercenaries' sovereignty over the Lan Xang kingdom or directly established diplomatic relations. However, why was there no movement at all? It was just like if you had taken over a county, the nearby counties should not be indifferent. Therefore, this was very abnormal. It wasn't until the Security Bureau sent news that Fan Yuhai was having a secret meeting with the generals of the 3 countries in Siam that Yang Qindong figured out the reason. Haha, Fan Yuhai, not bad, not bad. He said not bad twice in a row, showing that he was really in a good mood at this moment. Tiger's Man and Beta, Persei, heard this, and both of them were puzzled. Who was Fan Yuhai? He was a remnant of Jiaoji. If it wasn't for this person, there wouldn't have been the previous siege of Hanoi City. In that battle, Lung Fong and the auxiliary soldiers lost their brothers. Such a person was definitely an enemy. He was the kind of person who must be killed when they meet. However, why did the young master say that he was not bad? Yang Qindong's idea was actually very simple. It was because Fan Yuhai had previously led the trouble to the Lan Xang kingdom, which gave the mercenaries a chance to send troops. Now that he had led the trouble to the Siam kingdom, wasn't this still creating an opportunity for him? Previously, Yang Qindong had thought about whether to let Fan Yuhai go. Of course, this didn't mean that he wouldn't eliminate him. He just wanted to eliminate him later so that he could lead more countries into this situation and create enough excuses for him to attack. In fact, when he entered the Lan Xang kingdom, Yang Qindong had thanked him in his heart. What he did not expect was that Fan Yuhai seemed to know what he was thinking. Fan Yuhai had contacted the generals of Siam in such a short time. Moreover, he had contacted the generals of 3 countries at once. Fan Yuhai was really his soulmate. He was happy that he had an excuse, but Yang Qindong wouldn't launch an attack immediately, or wasn't as simple as just talking about it. Every battle involved too many things. There was information, terrain, comparison of forces and deployment, logistical support, provisions and equipment, morale, and so on. If any of these were not prepared, it might lead to the failure of the war, especially now that the army was still suppressing the foreign forces in Laos province. Without enough troops, Yang Qindong wouldn't make any decisions lightly. Order the Security Bureau to not be afraid of spending money. Find a way to understand more about the other party. After saying this to Tiger's Mane, Yang Qindong put the matter aside. Even if there was a war, he would have to wait for Luo Pa and Wu Sheng to be free. For now, he just had to wait and see. For now, it was better to help his future brother-in-law manage the situation in Laos province. The hearts of the people were the foundation of a country. In order to stabilize and gather the hearts of the people as soon as possible, Yang Qindong planned to bring the model of Yang Bao to Laos province. Previously, Yang Bao had been wandering around Bai Ming's capital and nearby areas. Because of the traffic and the situation, Yang Qindong's publication was very early, but its development was very slow. This was especially so after Yang Qindong left Bai Ming and went to the south. Yang Qindong even stopped publishing for a time. Who knew if someone would secretly make a move against them when he was no longer around? Lao province was different. This was Yang Qindong's territory, and he had the final say. If Yang Qindong wanted to publish Yang Qindong's newspaper here, he would not face any restrictions. Instead, he would have the full support of the local government. If he wanted to gather the hearts of the people, he had to let them know who he was and what he wanted to do. What did he do for them? Chapter 596. How could he achieve this result? Public opinion and propaganda were obviously very important. Yang Bao became the medium to communicate the close relationship between the government and the people. With Yang Qindong's approval, every large city in Laos that was occupied had a large tea house that was being renovated. It was named the World Knowledge Tea House. Once the tea house was completed, it would be open to the public. It would also become the place where Yongbao sold and published. Considering that many people did not read books and could not read at all, this tea house also had the function of reading newspapers. In other words, as long as you entered this tea house, as long as it was business hours, there would be people reading the latest Yongbao content for free. This ensured that everyone would know what was happening outside, what new policies were coming up, and what benefits the people could get. Not only that, but world knowledge was also free. In other words, drinking tea was free. This greatly lowered the threshold to enter this place. Of course, other than tea, other snacks, wine, and dishes would require money. After all, the tea house had to continue operating. In this way, unless the people who came were poor, as long as they had a bit of status, they would feel embarrassed to only drink tea and not order anything else. On average, there would not be a problem to break even with world knowledge. Because of the popularity, it would not be a problem to earn money at all. Speaking of which, even if it did not make money, Yang Qindong planned to subsidize and support it financially. After all, this was originally a propaganda tool. Those who were illiterate could listen to it for free and understand the world's affairs. Those who were literate could directly buy the latest issue of Yongbao and take it home to slowly read it. Not only that, if something interesting happened around you, such as some family affairs, strange or funny things, it would be counted. If you were treated unfairly by the government, you could also tell such a story to the staff of World Knowledge. Once it was accepted and included in the Yongbao, not only would the matter be valued by more people, there would be a high chance that it would be solved, and you would also receive a certain amount of information fees. This was also a good way to make money. What Yang Qindong did not expect was that the emergence of this policy actually gave birth to the journalist industry. There were actually some unaccomplished scholars who began to wander the streets and alleys in search of all kinds of things that happened among the common people. They then wrote stories and submitted them to Yongbao to earn royalties. Needless to say, some people really became rich because of this. The emergence of Yongbao became a bridge between the government and the people. Once the matter of the people was reported to Yongbao, the government must pay attention to it. It should be known that this Yongbao was not only read by Governor Luan Shaochen, but also the sixth young master would pay attention to it from time to time. If the matter was not properly solved, it would not be his ability problem. In the next official examination, they would be eliminated. The appearance of Yongbao had greatly affected the efficiency of the government, so they didn't dare to play any tricks. Many people also benefited from this. Yongbao was affectionately called the people's own newspaper. Because of this, the World Knowledge Tea House was full every day, other than some high-ranking officials and nobles who liked to appear here and know the contents of Yongbao immediately. Many people who had a little spare money were also willing to spend money here. These people seemed to be afraid that the World Knowledge Tea House would not be able to continue operating because of free tea. In this case, if they had any grievances or hatred, they would not have a direct channel to the higher-ups. Therefore, Sher and the others would come to support them. Once an industry was recognized by the people and received the support of the people, not only would it have a greater influence, but the speed of making money would also begin to accelerate. In less than a month, the World Knowledge Tea House turned its losses into profits. This was greatly beyond Yang Qindong's expectations. It was just that he had no intention of earning any money from this aspect. In line with the idea of taking from the people and using for the people, he ordered to increase the return of the author's fee and information fee. As a result, more and more people either raised the information or directly submitted a draft. Some people, when they really couldn't find any problems with the government, wrote a story about how his neighbor quarreled with each other last night and didn't sleep well. From this point of view, it was clear how influential Yongbao was. And it was such a newspaper that allowed the people to be able to protect their rights. It allowed them to write about the government's policies and various stories that seemed to have happened to them. It greatly reduced the distance between them and the government, and strengthened their recognition and identity of the Lao government. Seeing the effect of Yang Qindong's paper was so good, he waved his pen and asked Vietnam to follow suit. He also sent some of Yang Bao's experienced people to help Vietnam. And just a month later, dozens of world knowledge tea houses also sprouted like bamboo shoots after the rain in the major cities of Vietnam. There was a trend of more and more of them, and the distance between the mercenaries and the Vietnamese people was shortened. Waiting for the dust to settle, Yang Qindong had already stayed in Lao province for 3 months, and Yuan Shaoqin had been the provincial governor for more than 2 months. He had already begun to adapt to the new environment and work. In 3 months, Lung Fong and the auxiliary soldiers rode bicycles all over Laos, conquering one city after another. In the face of an invincible force, more and more people surrendered. Lao province was finally liberated. During this time, the Phnom Penh dynasty, Siam dynasty, and Awad dynasty did not do anything. It was as if they did not see this at all. These people seemed to have the mentality of not getting close, and not offending the mercenaries. If it was a weak person who had just taken over a new force, they would need a long period of stability. It could be 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 or 20 years. If it was Yang Qindong, of course he wouldn't sit and wait. From his experience, the 3 neighboring countries would not really let Lao province develop so smoothly. The only reason they did not act was because they had not found the right opportunity. For example, once the main force of the mercenaries left, the siege of Hanoi province would most likely repeat. Now that Lao province had a clear political system, the people were united and the people were stable. It was time for stable development. Yang Qindong would never allow the same thing to happen again. So, if others did not come looking for trouble with him, he would take the initiative to find trouble with others. Since he had to fight, it was better to fight outside. At least, if he fought outside, he would not feel the slightest bit of heartache, even if the city was destroyed. He called Yunk from the Foreign Affairs Department. After making contributions in the liberation wars of Vietnam and Laos, he had been promoted and became the director of the Foreign Affairs Department. He was in charge of the major matters in this area. Yang Qindong called him over because he wanted to hear his opinion on the war. He had been promoted and gained more power. The burden on his shoulders had also become heavier. Yunk was a smart man. After he was promoted to director, he learned more about the situation of the Foreign Affairs Group of the Security Bureau and sent more people. He wanted to understand the situation of the 3 provinces and understand it thoroughly so that the 6th young master could make the next step. Waiting for Yang Qindong to ask him, he explained the plan he had in mind for a long time in detail. The 6th young master, Fan Yuhai, is still wandering in the Chiang Rai area of Siam. To outsiders, it seems that they have no contact with the higher-ups of Siam. However, our people have already investigated and found that their relationship is not as strange as it seems. On the contrary, the food for the 5,000 elite cavalry was provided by Siam. They should be waiting for an opportunity. As expected, listening to the information reported by Skylark, Yang Qindong nodded his head in deep thought. Since Siam was secretly supporting Fan Yuhai, it meant that they did not want to be on good terms with him. The reason why they did not act now was that the time was not right. Go on, Director Yunk. When do you think they will attack us? What should we do? Yang Qindong wanted to test Yunk. He wanted to see how much Yunk's thoughts were similar to his own. Seeing Yang Qindong's look of approval, Yunk was encouraged and continued. 6th young master, whether it is Fan Yuhai or Siam, they will definitely be our enemies. After all, the development of Lao province is very good. With the completion of the commercial street and its use, it has attracted a lot of businessmen. This is a treasure trove. No one will not be jealous. But as for when they will come, I am not sure. However, they must be waiting for an opportunity when they think it is suitable to send troops, or when our forces are empty. Just like when the Lansong soldiers attacked Hanoi. Well said. Yang Qindong nodded approvingly. This was what he thought. Director Yunk, do you think we should take the initiative to attack them? No, I don't think so. Yunk replied with a very firm tone. Oh, why? Yang Qindong's interest was piqued. Sixth young master, I have sent people to investigate Siam. I found that Siam is not weak in terms of military strength or economic ability. Especially in the absence of war in recent years, their internal development speed was very fast. Now, just the military strength alone already had 500,000 soldiers. If the situation required, they could recruit another 300,000 soldiers. With such a strong military strength, if we take the initiative to attack, I am afraid that we will not be able to gain much advantage. Even if we can defeat them, it will consume a lot of our resources. There's no room for us to develop in other areas in a short time. If other countries suddenly attack us at that time, such as the Phnom Penh dynasty in the south, we will be in a bad situation where we have to fight on both sides. This is very disadvantageous. Chapter 597. After saying this, Yunk was afraid that what he said would diminish his own prestige and boost the morale of others, so he quickly added, although our mercenaries are very powerful and are not afraid of any enemy, if the plan is more thorough, we can completely avoid such a situation. Isn't that better? How can the plan be more thorough? Yang Qindong had already heard the meaning of Yunk's words. Presumably, this person with a talent for intelligence must have a very good idea. First, enter the Phnom Penh dynasty and solve the problem in the south. We don't have to completely occupy them. In fact, we don't have enough manpower now, but as long as we are afraid of them, it will be fine. So, when Siam dares to make a move, we have nothing to worry about. Of course, if it is done well, this is also a show of strength to scare the tiger, and it can buy some time for development. As if he had made a big decision, Yunk said this in one breath, and then stared at Yang Qindong intently, waiting for the sixth young master's answer. Attacking the Phnom Penh dynasty first was the final decision made by Yunk after understanding and investigating everything in the past 3 months. If it was rejected by the sixth young master, it meant that all the previous efforts would be in vain. The plan would have to be pushed back, which not only took time, but also made him lose face in the eyes of the sixth young master. This was definitely not what he wanted to see. Yang Qindong listened carefully to Yunk's plan, but did not immediately express his opinion. Instead, he got up and walked to the sand table not far away. When Yunk also walked to his side, he asked casually, "If we want to attack the Phnom Penh kingdom, we always need a reasonable reason." Sixth young master, your subordinate has already prepared a reason. As long as you give the order, we can brazenly kill our way over. Hearing Yang Qindong's request for a reason, Yunk's heart pounded rapidly. He knew that this was the sixth young master's approval of his plan and had begun to consider how to implement it. What kind of reason? Yang Qindong hadn't thought that Skylark would have thought of this, and he couldn't help but look at her in a new light. Sixth young master, I have already made arrangements. First, I spent a lot of money to buy 50 sets of enemy military uniforms from the Right Prime Minister Dun of the Golden Border Dynasty. Then they would send out intelligence agents to disguise themselves as them and attack the Solangan family's caravan. By the way, the Sarangans are a famous business family in Laos. They are very rich and have always had business dealings with the Phnom Penh dynasty. Listening to Skylark's plan step by step, Yang Qindong's mind was filled with 2 words: shift the blame onto others. That's right, Skylark's plan was to blame the Golden Rim dynasty for the ambush of the Solangans. In this way, the mercenaries would have enough manpower to send out troops. After all, since the Solangans paid the taxes to the mercenaries on time, the mercenaries should protect their safety and business interests. It had to be said that this plan was pretty good. It was a commonly used excuse to invade. However, looking at Skylark's arrangement, he seemed to be more prepared and detailed. Well, this is a good plan, but it's not enough. The Golden Rim dynasty has never been in our eyes, but the strength of Siam should not be underestimated. The young master thinks we should do this," Yang Qindong said, making up for some flaws in the plan. Skylark listened with stars in his eyes. He had a feeling that the sixth young master must have wanted to do this for a long time. The reason why he said it was because he wanted to test himself and listen to other people's opinions. In any case, this time his answer should be very satisfactory to the sixth young master, and his impression of him would be better. Yang Qindong's impression of Skylark was indeed good. This person was good at intelligence and dared to be a lone hero. Now, his ability to trick people was also very good. Anyone who had such an opponent would have a headache. Of course, it was a blessing to have such a subordinate. There were many things that he did not need to think too much about, and Skylark would do everything for him. Such a subordinate was worrisome and reassuring. With Skylark's ability, would he betray his master one day? Haha. He believed that as Skylark understood the strength and power of the mercenaries, such thoughts would become smaller and smaller until they did not exist at all. Yang Qindong could promote a person, and he could also destroy a person. However, no matter how much he thought about it, Skylark wouldn't do such a thing. He was a smart person, and smart people would know how to do it. They would be able to obtain more benefits while protecting themselves. No one knew what Yang Qindong and Skylark talked about. In short, Skylark left with a face full of excitement. After some time, Tiger's man was called into the study room and received an order. That was to secretly transfer the 6 battalions and 1 regiment of the newly formed auxiliary troops over to Laos. He had great use for them. Currently, there were 2 main regiments and 22 auxiliary battalions of the Cold Vanguard Army in Lao Province. Overall, there were about 12,000 soldiers. Even with the 30,000 Laotian troops, led by Higuang, it did not reach 50,000. In the eyes of outsiders, it was clearly not enough to start a war against the 3 neighboring countries with just this amount of military power. Although it was said that quality was the most important thing in an army, if there were too few men, they would not even be able to defend the city. How could that be possible? In order to make preparations, Yang Qindong could only go to Chichen City to transfer more troops. With another Cold Vanguard regiment and 6 other battalions, although there were only 4,000 men, it was still not enough. However, it was more than enough to deal with the current situation. At least the plan could be carried out. Our forces are still too little. Yang Qindong sighed and shook his head, suppressing the thought. With his current strength and the number of people under his control, it was not too difficult to build an army of a few 100,000 men. However, how could an army like that fight? He wanted to build elite troops. This way, not only could he equip them with the best equipment, he could also save a lot of money. Although he didn't lack money now, there were too many things he wanted to do. For example, he was preparing to build cement roads in all directions on all the land he occupied. Just this project alone would cost a lot of money. After Skylark received Yang Qindong's permission, he began to plan. Only 10 days later, he received news that the caravan of the Sorangan family was returning from Golden Rim City, the capital of the Golden Rim dynasty. Tell them to get ready. The plan will be carried out at Shangding. Skylark said confidently. Shangding. It was one of the cities in the Golden Rim dynasty. It was close to the Mekong River and was very close to the Lao province. Because of the importance of the geographical location, it had also become an important supply point for many caravans. Nashin was leading the caravan here to replenish their supplies. As an established business family in Laos, they bought a lot of new products from the commercial street in Wanxiang City when it opened. Then he led a team to deliver the goods to Phnom Penh Dynasty's capital, Phnom Penh City. After making a big profit there, they returned. Rare goods were sold in the commercial street, such as perfumes and mirrors, which were priceless. Even the colorful underwear and cheongsams were sought-after goods in the eyes of the nobles of various countries. In less than a day, all the goods were sold out, and the price was increased by 10% in the process. The profit from this trip alone was more than 20 times the profit of selling ordinary goods. Nashin, who had made a lot of money, was grinning from ear to ear. He took the caravan of more than 100 people and 6 carts out of Shangding. He rented a big boat and sailed to the Mekong River. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that these goods were selling well and make more trips to the Sorangan family to ensure a higher status in the family. His face was full of confidence, and he even began to imagine how popular he would be when he returned to the clan this time, and how people would look at him with worshipful eyes. Suddenly, he saw a military ship coming from afar. The reason why he said it was a military ship was because the deck of the opposite ship was full of men wearing the Golden Rim dynasty's military uniform. From afar, they were all majestic. Their armor shone in the reflection of the sun. The sabers in their hands glowed with cold light, carrying a murderous aura. A military ship? When he saw the ship, Naexayen still had a question mark in his heart. He didn't know how many times he had been to the Mekong River, but this was the first time he saw a military ship. The doubt in his heart just flashed through his mind. After all, the most important thing was to deal with the problem at hand. He hurriedly made a gesture to a guard behind him. The guard turned back to the cabin and came back with a money bag with 100 taels of silver in his hand. Nashin took the money bag and put it in his arms. He felt that it was heavy, and at the same time he felt more confident. When he saw the military ship approaching his ship, he didn't feel so nervous. Come out and be checked. After a wide plank was placed on the ship, the soldiers on the opposite side came over and approached Nashin. Haha, thank you for your hard work. But I wonder why you are here? With a fawning expression, he immediately went up to greet them. What? Do we have to greet you if we want to appear anywhere? The leader of the soldiers looked unhappy. No, I'm just curious. I've never seen you on this route before. Of course, you can appear anywhere you want. By the way, we have a very good relationship with General Dagon. Every time we go to Golden Rim City, we will visit him in his mansion. While smiling, he talked about his background. Chapter 598. Those who were able to trade between the two countries had to have a powerful background. The Solangan family had found a backer in the Golden Border dynasty, General Daen. This person was also the #1 general of the Golden Border dynasty. So you are General Daen's men. The leader nodded thoughtfully, then approached Naexayen and said, To tell you the truth, Lao province has been occupied by mercenaries. His Majesty is worried that they will suddenly make a move, so he sent us to check the river to see if there are any suspicious people. The leader's attitude had changed greatly, which was within Naexayen's expectations. In the past, it was not like he had never been inspected by a military officer on land, but usually as long as he reported his name and gave some money, he would be sent away. This time he did not think too much. Instead, he took out 100 taels of silver from his pocket and handed it to the leader as he said with a smile, We are all honest businessmen. We never participate in politics, so don't worry. He reached out and took the 100 taels of silver. After casually weighing it, the leader nodded with satisfaction. Okay, you don't look like bad guys. How about this? Gather everyone and let us put on a show. It will be easier to explain when we go back. Okay. After receiving the silver, the other party's attitude became much more polite. He accepted the letter and smiled. Then he turned around and called out to his men, Come, everyone come out. This is just a routine inspection. Let's go for a walk. Under Naexayen's orders, the caravan servants walked out of the cabins one by one and gathered on the spacious deck. More than 100 people were forced to line up in a few rows before standing properly. It wasn't just them. Even the boatmen were summoned to undergo inspection. Sir, look, everyone is here. They are all honest people. He smiled mischievously and waited for this sir to finish his inspection before continuing his journey back to the country. Everyone is here? Not a single one? The leader asked in disbelief. Of course not. Naexayen had no intention of going against the leader. Of course. He did not have any intention of hiding anyone. Then let's search again. The soldier still didn't seem to believe it and ordered his soldiers. Before long, the soldiers began to walk around the ship. After some time, they came out one by one. Then they nodded and said, "There's no one left." "See? What did I say? Is there really no one? How could we have the guts to lie to the military master? Now that everyone has come out and the inspection is over, can we let them pass?" He also thought that these soldiers were too serious, thinking that he had a military background and had given the other party benefits. Everything should be over by now. A cold smile appeared on the corner of the soldier's mouth. This smile fell into the eyes of Na-Exen. He didn't know why, but he suddenly had a bad feeling. Under this feeling, his body involuntarily took 2 steps back. The soldier didn't seem to notice his actions. Instead, he walked towards the people on the deck. As he walked, he said, "Look at all of you. Each and every one of you has shifty eyes. Why do you all look like bad people?" Well, it seems that General Hun's son is right. Those who seek refuge with General Da and are not good people. So you can all go to hell. Kill. Everyone was still digesting the soldier's words. Suddenly, there was a flash of sword light. 50 soldiers simultaneously slashed at the hundreds of people who were surrounded. Not to mention that they weren't prepared, even if they were. How could they be opponents when they were unarmed? Ah! Ouch, it hurts. Ouch, ouch, ouch. They're killing people. Run. Suddenly, all kinds of shouts came from below the deck. The pungent smell of blood also entered everyone's nostrils. Na-Exen, who had already felt that something was wrong, saw the scene in front of him. How could he not know what was going on? At that moment, he turned pale with fright. He desperately turned around and ran to the side of the ship behind him. Don't let him escape. Otherwise, General Hun's son will definitely take our lives. As if he just noticed, Na-Exen, the leader of the soldiers, shouted and chased after him with his sword. Na-Exen had already taken a few steps back, so he was very close to the side of the ship. Now he was desperately running away, so his speed was even faster. Almost as soon as the voice fell, he jumped into the river. After a splash, he disappeared into the river. Oh, why did one of them run away? Shoot the arrows. The leader of the soldiers was furious. But after the order was issued, the soldiers around him didn't intend to shoot the arrows. Instead, they continued to kill the people on the ship. In just a moment, more than 100 people became corpses. No one was left alive. Oh, take away the valuable things on the ship and then cut the ship. Brothers, get ready to withdraw. The leader of the soldiers laughed. The mission was successfully completed. It was time to leave and report to Master Yunk. Yes, they were the spies of the Security Bureau who entered the Golden Border dynasty one step earlier. This time they were ordered by the Director of Foreign Affairs, Master Yunk, to intercept the merchant ship of the Solingen family here and let one live. As for why they did this, they didn't need to think too much. The Security Bureau always had their own rules. It had become a habit to just do and not say. As for Nongxin, he jumped into the river and dived into the distance. Fortunately, he went out all year round and was good at swimming. There weren't many waves on the river, and it was broad daylight. He quickly found the right direction and escaped. After getting ashore, he identified the direction and rushed all the way, ignoring hunger and thirst. Finally, he entered Laos after 4 days. Then he found a branch of the Solingen Company. After revealing his identity, he got into a carriage and rushed to Wanxiang City overnight. After another 7 days, Nongxin finally saw the city gate of Wanxiang City. At this moment, he couldn't stop his tears from flowing. He was like a child who finally found his parents. He instantly had a pillar of support. In the ancestral courtyard of the Solingen family, the people with some status and those who could take charge of the family were all gathered. In the main seat, there was a young man full of vitality and exuding endless energy. He was the new patriarch of the family, Nongxin Si. Nongxin Si had been smart since he was young, especially when it came to business and dealing with people. He had shown great talent since he was very young. Every business that he handled brought great benefits to the family, and he became a role model for the younger generation. Since it was a big family, there was naturally no lack of talents. On the contrary, the mentality of seniority was very serious. Even if Nongshim Si had the ability, he still needed a huge opportunity to rise up. Otherwise, he could only wait until he had enough seniority. Nongshim Si's luck was quite good. The opportunity had finally arrived. The seemingly powerful Lansong kingdom had been destroyed in a single night. While everyone was still watching and still had a glimmer of hope for the former Emperor Pius, Nongsi decisively made his move. Since they were a business family, they naturally knew more about the outside world. Otherwise, it would be easy for them to be taken advantage of. When Nongshim Si was purchasing goods from a business street in Yunnan province, he was the person in charge of this. From there, he heard a lot about the sixth young master and saw how powerful the mercenaries were. Now, he knew that the Lansong kingdom would definitely become a thing of the past. It was impossible for them to make a comeback. As such, he immediately made the decision to form a good relationship with the mercenaries. Opportunities were always prepared for those who were prepared. Since he couldn't form a relationship with the mercenaries, Nongshim Si took the initiative to look for the former state preceptor Long Qi and expressed his intention to form an alliance. Long Qi was also the winner of this political change. Although he wouldn't be able to enjoy any power in the future, he received 5 million taels of business capital. Not only that, he was also allowed to do business in the new Lao province. He wouldn't be pushed aside by the Han merchants in the business street. This was Long Qi's advantage. After Nongshim Si came looking for him, the retired state preceptor felt like a tiger that had grown wings. He now only had money and business qualifications, but he didn't know how to do business and how to make more money. All of these happened to be the strengths of the Sorangan family. A strong alliance, this was what they wanted. Long Qi agreed to the Sorangan family's request for cooperation. As the person who put forward the proposal, Nongshim Si's contribution couldn't go unnoticed. He seized the opportunity and became the new patriarch of the family. The old patriarch entered a state of seclusion. After becoming the new patriarch, Nongshim Si wanted to bring the family to a higher level of glory. He ordered several merchant teams to set off together. He wanted to show everyone how right it was to choose him as the patriarch. However, no one expected that something would happen. Not only did they lose their money, but more than 100 people were killed. If it weren't for Nongshim's good swimming skills and quick reaction, he would have died as well. The Sorangan family would still be in the dark. Nongshim Si knelt on the ground and told everyone what happened at the Mekong River in front of the new patriarch and his family members. As soon as his voice fell, it immediately attracted the angry condemnation of the other clansmen. Bastards! How can these people be so shameless? They're clearly acting like bandits. We can't just let it go like this. We must give them an explanation. Yes, they must give us an explanation. More and more family members were infected by the angry atmosphere. They were filled with righteous indignation. It was as if they would rush to Phnom Penh dynasty and kill the soldiers if they were given a knife. Compared to the angry faces of the other family members, Nongshim Si didn't shout with them. Instead, he began to analyze the whole thing seriously. Chapter 599. Judging from the testimony in the letter, it was obvious that there was a conflict between the two generals of the Golden Rim dynasty. Later, when they saw that the Sorangan family had made so much money, General Hun's son disregarded General Dun's face and suddenly attacked them. It was the best of both worlds. The only fly in the ointment was that he had escaped back after accepting the letter, and the truth had come to light. The Sorangan family had been doing business for generations, so they had some money. However, it was obviously unrealistic to say that they wanted to compete with the generals of a country. If they really dared to do so, it would be like hitting a stone with an egg. In the end, the whole family's business in the Golden Bien dynasty would be wiped out. Businessmen mainly pursued wealth, so they would not use weapons unless it was absolutely necessary. Fighting with force was obviously not what Nongsi wanted, nor was it in line with the family's interests. However, since Hun's son had made a move, how could he let it go? How could he easily bow his head? He would probably not even admit what he had done in the past. In this case, things were a bit tricky. While Nongsi was still thinking about the gains and losses of this matter, the family members had stopped arguing and looked at him. It seemed that this time, the patriarch needed to make a decision. Everyone, please calm down. Let me discuss this matter with Mr. Longqi and then make a decision. He, Nongsi, didn't make any rash decisions in public. He knew that the more important the matter was, the more he had to calm down. Otherwise, if he acted rashly, he might bring terrible consequences to his entire family. Since the patriarch had spoken, no one had any better ideas, so they had to agree. However, some elders had already said that if this matter was not handled properly, they would consider reconvening the family meeting to choose a new patriarch. Nongsi could be promoted because he had Longqi's support. However, if this support could not guarantee the family's interests, then they did not mind inviting the old patriarch. From this matter, it could be seen that many people were jealous of Nongsi's promotion. The family was not stable. Knowing the elders' intentions, Nongsi was not angry. Instead, he smiled and promised that the matter would be solved. After that, he brought a few of his attendants to the former state preceptor's residence and met with Longqi. He was no longer the state preceptor, and Longqi didn't have as many official matters as before. Even the nobles of Kanglin were still ostracizing him. He wasn't used to being idle all of a sudden. Fortunately, the road of business had opened, and he had already begun to reap rewards. Shining silver entered his pocket, making him smile so widely that he couldn't close his mouth. He also seemed to have suddenly become younger. Knowing that Nongsi had come, Longqi laughed and walked into the main hall. He thought that the Golden Bian dynasty was going to settle the bill. He heard that he could get nearly 50,000 taels of silver, which was equivalent to several years of his salary. How could he not be happy? Mr. Long, something's happened. When he saw Longqi, Nongsi immediately put down his pride as the patriarch. He cupped his fists and repeated what he said in the letter. Longqi retracted his complacent expression and quietly listened to Nongsi's words. After understanding the whole situation, his first thought was that the other party wanted to take advantage of him and take advantage of him. But after thinking about it carefully, the other party now had more to rely on him, so they shouldn't do such a thing. Could it be that someone really didn't have eyes and took their money? It was difficult to do business, especially when you had to look at the faces of high officials and nobles. Sometimes you might even suffer a lot if you couldn't manage one aspect well. Although Longqi hadn't done business before, he still knew the truth. But usually the smaller the business, the greater the constraints. On the contrary, the more powerful the family, the easier it would be to do business. This was the power of connections. The Sorangan family had been doing business for generations. They had some connections and roots in some neighboring countries, even in the great Ming dynasty. Logically speaking, such a robbery and murder shouldn't fall on them. But why did such a thing suddenly happen? As a former state preceptor, Longqi obviously thought more than Nongsi, a businessman. It was precisely because he thought more that he felt the trickiness of this matter. Mr. Patriarch, what are you going to do? Longqi didn't express his opinion immediately. It was a habit he had cultivated for many years. Before making a final decision, he would first listen to other people's opinions and learn from their strengths to make up for his weaknesses. Mr. Long, I want to send someone to communicate with General Hun's son and see if I can persuade him. If they don't give us face, we can ask General Ming for help and let him put pressure on them. In short, if we don't solve this problem, our caravan can't go to the Golden Border dynasty. Nongsi had thought of many countermeasures along the way, but he still felt that these conventional methods were not enough. That's right. Longqi nodded in agreement. He agreed with Nongsi's suggestion, but Nong Si's face showed a hint of hesitation. But what? Mr. Patriarch, since we are already partners, just say what you want to say. Long Chi showed a trace of dissatisfaction with Nong Si's method of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. He had been an official for many years and held a high position. What hadn't he seen before? How could he not see through Nong Si's tricks? After being exposed, Nong Si's face showed a trace of embarrassment, but he soon returned to normal. A businessman must be thick-skinned. This was always the most important factor. A person who flinched when faced with a problem was destined to not achieve great things. Yes, Mr. Long, you're right. It's my fault. After admitting his mistake, Nong Si went straight to the point. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to resolve this matter, since General Hun's son has already taken action. He won't spit out the fat meat that's already in his mouth. In fact, he might even deny it. If that's the case, I'm afraid that even if General de N puts pressure on him, it won't work. Not to mention, it's still unknown whether the two generals will really fall out with each other for a businessman like us. So, we have to make other preparations. Other preparations? What do you mean? Long Chi naturally understood the reason behind it. Officials protecting each other was not just a saying. When facing merchants, officials would always have a sense of superiority. Naturally, Nong Si's considerations had their own reasons. After pondering for a moment, Nong Si finally raised his head and said to Long Chi, "We have to be prepared. If we really can't do it, we can ask for help from the mercenaries." Ask for help from the mercenaries? Long Chi was shocked after hearing this. Then he shook his head and said, No, how can the mercenaries bother with such a small matter? Besides, the Golden Border dynasty is an independent dynasty. They have no subordinate relationship with the mercenaries. Long Chi shook his head, of course. He used to be a state preceptor, but now he was just a commoner. Previously, Yunk wanted to use him, so he was allowed to make conditions. Now that he was given 5 million taels of silver, he was allowed to do business, and he was given priority to take some goods from the commercial street. This was already very considerate. One shouldn't push one's luck. Naturally, this was also because Long Chi was currently in a weaker position. Otherwise, who knows how many times he would have taken advantage of this situation. Why not? Nong Si's face was firm. Mr. Long, didn't the mercenaries say that? They will protect the people, oh no. It's the interests of the people under them. Now that we are in Laos, we are already considered citizens here. We are doing business and have paid the business tax. Now that we have a problem, shouldn't we ask for help? Nong Si wanted to say that he should ask for an explanation from them, but he knew that he should keep it to himself. He didn't have the guts to make things difficult for the mercenaries. I still can't. Long Chi was first persuaded by Nong Si's words, but then he shook his head. Now he was just a commoner. Who knew if the mercenaries would care about him? If he took the initiative to ask for help, what if the mercenaries suddenly wanted to settle old scores? Money moved people's hearts. Now everyone knew that he had received 5 million taels of silver from the mercenaries. If someone wanted to take advantage of him and took the initiative to ask for money, should he give it to them? As for whether the mercenaries would do this, anyway, when Long Chi was the state preceptor, he did this many times, judging others by their own standards. Of course, he would think that this was the right thing to do. Long Chi shook his head like a rattle drum, which made Nong Si feel a little discouraged. The reason why he wanted to work with Long Chi was not only because he could get more goods from the business street, but also because of Long Chi's connections and identity. If he couldn't even do this, why should he work with Long Chi and give up the benefits? This was not an ordinary matter. It was related to whether he could continue to be the head of the family. If he couldn't find a reasonable solution, he would be beaten back to his original state. It might even be worse than before. After all, everyone knew that he had the ambition to be the head of the family. Back then, no matter who became the head of the family, they would all suppress him. Now that he was the head of the family, of course, Nong Si didn't want to return to the past, let alone the past that was worse than before. Nong Si didn't want to be too harsh, but he had no choice but to use his trump card. Mr. Long, you must report this matter to the mercenaries and ask them for help. If you can't do that, I don't think there's any need for you to cooperate with the Solingans. What did you say? Long Chi's gaze turned cold. The aura of a superior was revealed at this moment. Chapter 600. It was just an empty threat. Nong Si did not take it seriously. I've already made it very clear. Please reconsider your choice. That's right. Working with you is the result of my insistence. However, if I'm no longer the patriarch because of this, then our cooperation will naturally end. Moreover, I think that even if there's a new patriarch, they won't work with you anymore. After all, cooperation requires both sides to work hard. The threat in Nong Si's words was very obvious. Cooperation required both sides to work hard and also required both sides to display their strength. If Long Chi did not have the strength, the outcome would be obvious. Long Chi's expression was very ugly at this moment. He wanted to wave his hand and say that if they did not want to cooperate, then so be it. After all, he had the channels to purchase goods and sufficient funds. However, these were not enough for a businessman. What they needed more was a strong sales network. Coincidentally, these were the things that the Sorangan family had and were good at. If he left them, perhaps Long Chi could continue to operate independently. However, it would take a long time to reach a scale. For the sake of money, Long Chi could not make such a brainless decision. Long Chi's expression changed again and again. He smiled very sincerely. Mr. Patriarch, what are you doing? I was just joking. Just as you said, since we are now citizens of Laos and we are paying business tax, I think they should be more than happy to help us out when we have a problem, right? Long Chi changed his words, or rather, he was forced to change his words. Since the situation was not good, he had no choice but to lower his head. Nong Si smiled in satisfaction. I was just joking with Mr. Long. Since that's the case, when do you think we should talk to the mercenaries about this? This matter cannot be rushed. The mercenaries do big things. How about this? Let me contact them first. I'll give you an answer a day later, Long Chi replied with a smile. He had not contacted Yun Kei for a long time. Now he did not even know where he was. How could he meet him just because he wanted to? Knowing that Long Chi was going to use his connections, Nong Si's goal was achieved. He smiled and left the state preceptor's residence. In the following time, Long Chi immediately sent out his men. He needed to know where Yun Kei was. Where was Yun Kei? Of course, he was in Wanxiang City. However, as an agent of the Security Bureau, his whereabouts had always been difficult to track. Unless he wanted to meet someone else, it was too difficult to find him except for a limited number of people. It would be difficult for Long Chi to find Skylark. But what he didn't know was that Skylark was paying attention to him. He even got the news that Nong Si went to the Long residence. You're finally anxious? Very good. After hearing his subordinate's report, Skylark's face was filled with a victorious smile. Half a day had passed, but there was still no news about Skylark. It wasn't that his men didn't benefit from it, but the mercenaries were an impenetrable force, and outsiders had no chance to talk to them. They couldn't just go to the camp of the mercenaries or the provincial government to look for them openly, right? If that was the case, it wouldn't be looking for someone but seeking death. Men, prepare a carriage. We're going to General He's residence. Long Chi had no choice but to rely on his old face to do the job. No matter what, He Guang only joined the mercenaries because of his introduction, so he owed him a favor. However, Long Chi knew that this was the only time he could do this. The next time he had something to do, it was hard to say if He Guang would be willing to meet him. Long Chi was quite lucky. He Guang had just returned from killing bandits outside. After the servant reported, a guard walked out of the residence and led Long Chi to the depths of the residence. In front of the guard, Long Chi also lowered his posture. From this point, it could be seen that he was very clear about his identity. Usually, people like this wouldn't be detestable. In the living room, He Guang met Long Chi. After not seeing him for almost 3 months, He Guang had a colder and more murderous aura. Fortunately, when he saw Long Chi, he intentionally restrained his murderous aura and showed a warm side. State Preceptor Long, please don't, General He. In the future, you can just call me Mr. Long. Long Chi didn't dare to be arrogant and refused repeatedly. Okay, Mr. Long, how do you have time to come to my residence? He Guang laughed. He was very satisfied with Long Chi's intentional lowering of his status. Sai, it's a long story. Long Chi said while observing He Guang with the corner of his eyes, waiting for him to ask him. Otherwise, if he took the initiative to ask and was rejected, it would be too embarrassing. He Guang was very respectful and asked with a smile, Mr. Long, do you have any other troubles? You put down your political affairs and focus on being a rich man. This is something that I can't ask for. Long Chi shook his head. General He, you only see the glamorous side of me. You don't know that business is not so easy. You also know that I'm working with the Sorangan family. Not long ago, He Guang sat in his seat with a serious face. When he heard that someone had robbed a merchant ship on the Mekong River, he couldn't help but frown. He wasn't faking it. He was really angry at the audacity of the Phnom Penh dynasty's General Hun senator, the current He Guang, could be described as a different person than he used to be. With the power of 30,000 soldiers in his hand, he became the representative of the local forces in Laos. Of course, this representative was not self-appointed. The locals were willing to ask him for help. In front of the mercenaries, he didn't dare to call himself the leader of any other forces. This was especially true for the current governor of Laos, Luan Shaochin. Although he was young, he was decisive in his actions. In less than 2 months, 7 officials had died in his hands because of crimes, and more than 30 officials had been exiled and sentenced to death. It was this decisive killing that made the politics of Laos become clear. The dark things of the past had disappeared. After all, no one would joke about their own life. With the military power in his hands, He Guang was even more careful in his actions. Even when others came to him for help, he knew what he could ask and what he couldn't do. Otherwise, he would be in deep trouble and unable to save himself. He knew more and had more dealings with the mercenaries. He had met Luan Shaochin more than once to discuss the future of Laos. This made him understand what the young man's idea was. The young man wanted to build a strong Laos. This strong Laos would not only have a strong reputation, but also allow the people here to live a rich life. In ancient times, the feudal dynasties were divided into ranks. Laos was also divided into ranks. To be specific, the Han people were the first, and the other foreign races were second, third, or even lower. Luan Shaochin wanted to lead all the people on the road to wealth, so that they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. Such an ambition was easy to say, but it was very difficult to achieve. Since ancient times, many people with great talents and great foresight had such a goal. However, no matter how hard they worked, there would always be people who didn't have enough to eat or wear warm clothes. It was obvious how difficult it was to achieve wealth together. Luan Shaochin had the intention to do this. In his words, as long as the people were willing to work hard and endure hardships, they wouldn't starve, especially since the potato was a high-yield crop and had been widely planted. If they were lazy, they would be sent to reform through labor. In any case, the people had to be hardworking, and in exchange, they would also become rich. The real people were naturally able to endure hardships. In the past, even if they endured hardships, they wouldn't necessarily have a good harvest. However, under Luan Shaochin's leadership, the lives of those who could endure hardships began to change. After all, Laos was going through a huge change, and there was a lot of work to be done. Even if he worked hard to build houses and roads, the remuneration he earned was enough to feed his family. Under Luan Shaochin's leadership, Laos was changing day by day. Following that, the young governor began to focus on the treatment and fairness of the people. With Yang Bao, who could complain about any injustice, there were fewer cases of people bullying others. The people could earn more money and live better lives. They could also gain more respect in terms of human rights. This was all brought about by Luan Shaoqin. As the main representative of the natives of Laos, He Guang naturally saw all of this. This also allowed him to have a better understanding of Luan Shaoqin's governing philosophy. Luan Shaoqin was his direct superior, so how could he do his job well if he didn't figure it out? After understanding all of this, and hearing Nong Si's story, he had a feeling that Luan Shaoqin would do something about it. As he had said, they were now legal citizens of Laos and had paid taxes. Now that there was a problem outside, how could the Laos government ignore it? Okay, I understand. I will find a chance to report it to the higher-ups. He Guang hesitated for a moment, but he didn't make any promises. After all, this matter involved the Kim Bien dynasty. Although the mercenaries were powerful, they had taken down Jiaoji and Lansong kingdoms. Now was the time to digest the fruits of their labor. Who knew if there would be more problems? Long Qi knew that He Guang's current position was a little awkward. With a new master, he had to worry too much about what he said. Long Qi didn't press him too much, and instead, he cupped his fist to express his gratitude. After staying for a while, he left the He mansion. Yunk was in Yang Qindong's mansion, discussing the next step. Since the plan had already started, there was no reason to stop. Chapter 601. Report. The Security Bureau just sent news that Long Qi went to the He family's residence and left after an hour. Tiger's Mane walked into the study and reported to Yang Qindong, who was looking at the sand table. Got it. Yang Qindong nodded and said, pack up. We will head to Wulong City tomorrow morning. Not only was Tiger Edge stunned by this order, but even Skylark, who was analyzing the situation, was also stunned. Wulong City was a big city in Siam that was very close to Lao Province. It was less than 300 miles away from Wanxiang City. However, it was still within Siam's territory. Why did the sixth young master want to go there? The two of them could not figure out the meaning of this step. However, since it was the sixth young master's intention, they had to carry it out. Tiger's Mane nodded and left. Yun Kei, who was left behind, quickly looked at Wulong City on the sand table and fell into deep thought. He lowered his head for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Then he suddenly shouted, I know, sixth young master is preparing to, Sha! Yang Qindong smiled at Yun Kei and nodded, that's right. I am preparing to go to war with Siam. As for the extent of the war, it depends on the attitude of the other party. The sixth young master. Isn't this too risky? After all, we don't have a lot of troops. If we do this, it will be equivalent to going to war on two fronts. Although Yun Kei believed in the strength of the mercenaries, he could not help but worry when he thought about how the enemy this time was much stronger than Jiaoji and Lan Song Nation. This young master knows, but there will only be progress if there is a challenge. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring to always suppress others and beat the weak with strength? All right, this matter is only known to the few of us. Don't tell Shaoqin. The young master is looking forward to seeing how he will perform in such a situation, Yang Qindong said with interest. Yun Kei saw all of this, and he was very envious. What did Luan Shaoqin do to deserve such attention from the sixth young master? Let's hope that he can have a perfect performance this time. Once he passes this test, his future will be limitless. Not only did he not let Luan Shaoqin know that Yang Qindong secretly went to Wulong City, but Yang Qindong also did not show any interest in the matter of the Solingen family. He did not say that all of this was arranged by himself. He just wanted to see if the governor whom he had promoted had the ability to handle things. Although the other party was too young, the sixth young master's heart was still filled with hope. After a night of thinking, He Guang went to the provincial government early the next morning. He came to report to the governor Luan Shaoqin about the results of the Laotian mercenary army and the problems in the province. As the governor, Luan Shaoqin was not only in charge of the civil affairs, but also the military. This made him very busy, but also greatly increased his power. For example, if one were to take control of the military and government at the same time, it might cause problems in peacetime. However, in an unstable and dangerous place, such a method of centralizing power in one person was still necessary. At the very least, it would save a lot of unnecessary wrangling. Compared to 2 months ago, Luan Shaoqin was thinner and more tanned, but he looked more energetic. After the attendant invited He Guang into the office, he held a piece of paper in his hand and asked 7 or 8 questions. This was one of the methods Yang Qindong used to train them. A good memory was not as good as a bad pen. When He Guang came, he was very clear about the situation of the army. Naturally, he answered all the questions without showing any panic. About an hour later, the questions were answered. Luan Shaoqin nodded with satisfaction. General He, thank you for your hard work. Laotian is going to be a period of great development in Laotian. We absolutely cannot allow any chaos in public security. So, please don't relax and keep an eye on things. If you find any problems, solve them immediately. If you can't solve them, just report to me. Yes, Governor Luan, don't worry. I know what to do. He Guang's attitude was very humble. He did not dare to call himself a general in front of Luan Shaoqin. After the work report, Luan Shaoqin picked up the tea on the desk and took a sip. Subconsciously, she reminded He Guang that he could leave. Usually at this time, the subordinates would immediately stand up and leave with the excuse that they still had work to do. However, this time He Guang did not do so. Instead, he said tentatively, Governor Luan, I have something that I should report to you. What is it? Luan Shaoqin was a straightforward person. He was too busy with work. If he was not too busy, he would not ask He Guang to leave immediately, because in a while it would be time for the next person to report. It wouldn't be good to chat with others while drinking tea and delaying the main work. Since he had made up his mind, He Guang no longer hesitated. Instead, he used the simplest and most concise words to explain the matter that Long Qi had told him. After saying this, he immediately shut his mouth. He could pass on the message, but it was not up to him to make the final decision. He originally thought it was a military matter. He did not expect that the citizens involved were treated unfairly in other countries. This was the first time he encountered such a matter. For a moment, Luan Shaoqin did not know how to deal with it. However, his intuition told him that it was not a small matter. Okay, I understand. How about this? I will go to General He's residence tonight. Haha, speaking of which, I have been here for more than 2 months, but I have been busy and did not visit your wife. It is very rude of me. And when the time comes, I would like to ask General He to invite the people involved. I want to hear their words. Luan Xiaoli's face was full of smiles. When He Guang heard this, he was excited. Yes, then this general will be waiting for the governor's arrival tonight. What do you mean by not arriving? He said that he was just going to walk around casually. Don't make such a big commotion. Luan Shaoqin was still smiling, but the reminder in his words was very obvious. That was, he wanted to keep the matter of him going to the He residence as low-key as possible. Don't let everyone know. He Guang immediately understood Luan Shaoqin's meaning. The other party did not want to make a big commotion before making a decision. He immediately nodded. Yes, Governor Luan is right. We are just going to walk around in private. We will not disturb others. Very good. Then I will trouble General He to go and prepare. After He Guang left, Luan Shaoqin intentionally stood up to send him off. This gave He Guang a fright. He quickly said, Governor Luan, please stay. However, the moment the door closed, He Guang's bent body immediately straightened. This was the first time the governor personally sent him off after he reported his work. Although it was just for show, it was already a big improvement. It proved that his actions had caught the other party's attention. This was definitely a good start. It seems that I did the right thing by reporting this matter. I'll go back now and bring Long Chi and that Tanongsi over. I'll tell them what they can say and what they can't say when they meet Governor Luan tonight. He Guang muttered to himself as he walked out of the building. In the office, Luan Shaoqin had already closed his eyes and leaned against the back of the chair. Early this morning, he received the decision of the 6th young master to go on patrol. Therefore, when such a problem arose, it was impossible for him to ask for advice. Thinking about what Beta Persei said in the letter, the 6th young master said that you should work as you should, as long as everything is reasonable and legal. If anything happens, he will take care of it. This was not as simple as just saying. Luan Shaoqin knew that since the 6th young master said it, he could really do it. Even so, if he asked for advice on everything, he would be too narrow-minded. It's just the Phnom Penh dynasty. Daring to touch the caravan of Lao province is tantamount to provoking the Lao provincial government. Even so, it is absolutely impossible for the other party to not give an explanation. Otherwise, if they attack the caravan this time, I am afraid they will attack us next time. After making a general decision in his heart, Luan Shaoqin opened his eyes again. At this time there were footsteps outside the door. It was the next official to be received. He Mansion. Today, after He Guang came back, the He residents began to clean up. Then his personal guards were sent out one by one to be responsible for the safety of the surrounding streets. In short, Governor Luan came to his residence to give him face. Then he absolutely could not have any problems. Not even the slightest bit. When the sky just turned dark, Long Chi and Nong Si appeared at the door of He Mansion. Sure enough, they were traveling light. Each of them had only brought a personal attendant with them. It was not as simple as what the messenger had said, that they did not cause any commotion. At this time, Nong Si was very excited. Even when he arrived at He Guang's mansion, he still felt like he was in the clouds. Originally, he thought that after forcing Long Chi, even if he would think of a way, there would not be a result so quickly. After all, this person had already retired from the position of state preceptor. Moreover, he was a minister of the previous dynasty. Seriously speaking, it was already good that he was not punished. But who would have thought that the other party really found General He Guang? What was even more unexpected was that the matter had already been reported to Governor Luan. Who was Governor Luan? Although he had the title of governor, there was no difference between him and the previous king of Lan Song Kingdom, Piaci. Chapter 602. It was rumored that Governor Luan was very young and his future was limitless. If he could establish a good relationship with him, would the Sorangan family still have to worry about the future? He had asked around and found out that many big shots in Lansong wanted to meet Luan Shaoqin and have a meal with him. However, they had no way to do so. Now he had done it. From the moment he received the news, he wanted to shout out to the entire Lansong nation, no. It should be said that everyone in Laos knew about it. However, considering that He Guang had told him to keep a low profile, he suppressed his excitement and followed Long Ping to the He residence. The moment he entered the He manor and saw He Guang, Nong Si had a very respectful look. To him, it was rare to be able to establish a good relationship with He Guang. All right, Governor Luan will be here soon. Whatever he asks, just answer. If you don't know, don't say anything. He Guang reminded with a dark face. Of course. These words were mainly directed at Nong Si. Long Chi had been a state teacher before and knew what to do better than him. Yes. Nong Si was an understanding person, so he kept nodding. All right, then we'll stand here and wait for Governor Luan to come. After He Guang finished speaking, he stood there in a very standard military posture, giving people the feeling that Governor Luan would appear in front of him at any time. Long Chi and Nong Si naturally didn't dare to say anything. They also stood behind He Guang and waited. Fortunately, this didn't last very long. In less than an hour, a soldier in armor ran over. Seeing this soldier appear, Higuang's face turned serious. He turned around and said softly, "He's here." Then he turned around and looked into the distance until a group of people slowly appeared. Luan Shaoqin also kept a low profile this time. Other than himself, there were only 6 Lung Feng guards. After becoming the governor of a province, Yang Qindong gave him the standard of a squad of guards. However, he would not bring all of them with him. Usually, he would only bring 4 to 6 people with him when he took a break. "Greetings, Governor Luan." Seeing that Luan Shaoqin was about to appear in front of his residence, Higuang had already stepped forward to welcome him with a fawning expression. His attitude was completely different from Hilong Qi and Nong Si's earlier attitude. "General He, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I had some business to deal with at the last minute, so I was delayed." Luan Shaoqin was very young and humble. Even when facing his subordinate, Higuang, he still had a humble expression on his face. This was hard to imagine. Feudal dynasties had a strict hierarchy system. Superiors were always indifferent to their subordinates. Even if they did something wrong, they would not admit it. Of course, the subordinates would not dare to pursue the matter. However, Luan Shaoqin came late and apologized, which greatly exceeded the expectations of Long Qi and Nong Si. The two of them looked at each other at the same time, as if to say, could the person who came be Governor Luan? How could he apologize to a subordinate general? This didn't make sense. Higuang stood there. He was also frightened by Luan Shaoqin's attitude. Although the other party just said it casually, he still expressed his apology. This suddenly made him very nervous. "Governor Luan, please don't say that. You are a superior. We should wait for you." "Hey, you can't say that." The 6th young master said that all people are born equal. As long as everyone is willing to work hard, is willing to improve, and has a benevolent heart, then they will be respected. "So, I came late and delayed your time. It's just an apology. It's nothing. It's something that should be done." Luan Shaoqin suddenly became serious, as if he was talking about something very important. Higuang also put away the charming smile on his face. Luan Shaoqin had mentioned the 6th young master, who was a godlike existence in the eyes of some people. Even Higuang had only seen Yang Qindong once when he entered the city. At that time, he was so scared that he didn't dare to raise his head. He only knew that the 6th young master was very powerful, very powerful. Now that even Governor Luan Shaoqin was so serious, he of course had to stop smiling. These words also reached Long Qi and Nong Si's ears, and they couldn't help but tremble. Since Governor Luan Shaoqin said that all people were equal, didn't it mean that they had a chance? After all, they were also citizens of Laos. After a simple greeting at the door, Higuang quickly invited Luan Shaoqin into the house. "This is the first time I'm visiting. I brought some gifts for sister-in-law. General He, please accept it," Luan Shaoqin said with a smile as he casually sized up the He residence. A Lung Feng guard behind him then handed over a very exquisite box. This was the first cosmetics and perfume that were taken out of the imitation warehouse. After continuous development and self-processing in Qiming City, there was a new brand and packaging, Yang's Beautiful Beauty. Yang's Beautiful Beauty cosmetics had now become the best item in the eyes of upper-class women. Not only could it make women whiter and delay aging, there was also a set of 6 bottles of perfume that could make women exude different fragrances. The value of this set alone was more than 2,000 taels, and it belonged to the kind that had a price but no market. If it could be taken further away, even if the price was several times higher, it would still be a hot commodity. "Thank you." This general thanks Governor Luan for his kindness. Higuang took the gift with a flattered look and carefully put it in the hands of the servant. He spread his right arm and said, "Governor Luan, the banquet is ready, please. Let's go together." Luan Shaoqin still smiled and nodded, and under Higuang's lead, step by step, walked towards the banquet hall. Several people walked and chatted, and Long Qi and Hinongxi were also introduced to Luan Shaoqin by Higuang. Mr. Long has made a great contribution to the liberation of Lao province. This is something that the world will not forget. Looking at Long Qi, Luan Shaoqin said seriously, "Thank you. Thank you for Governor Luan's recognition. Thank you." Long Qi said with tears running down his face. Since the Lansong kingdom was destroyed and changed to Lao province, who knows how many people scolded him behind his back, saying that he was a traitor, unfilial, and so on. Although Long Qi could shamelessly ignore all of this, he still found that many people alienated from him. There were even people who threatened that a disloyal person like Long Qi would not really believe him. The current Lao province was only because it wanted to stabilize, so it did not bring up the old debts. It would not be long before someone came to find trouble with him. What a joke! The mercenaries gave Long Qi 5 million taels of silver. That was a huge sum. How could he not take it back? It was only a matter of time. Look, Long Qi would not be able to jump around for long. When these words reached Long Qi's ears, he was already trembling with fear. It must be said that he had considered this problem before, and he had the same worries. But what could he do? Leave now. If he really did that, it would only speed up the mercenaries' pace of making a move on him. After thinking about it, Long Qi decided to stay quiet, and he even reduced the chances of him showing up. It was so that people could gradually forget about him. Just like when he partnered with the Solingen family to do business, he would not show up. Instead, he chose to make a fortune in silence. This time, if it wasn't for this problem, he would also not want to have any dealings with the mercenaries. Even if Luan Shaoqin's power was monstrous, he did not want to see him if he could. Long Qi was not the only one with this idea. In the current Lao province, the mercenaries seemed to have gained a firm foothold, and they had gained the support of many people. However, the ones who truly supported them were the commoners who had benefited from them, as well as the Han people living in Lao province. Because of the arrival of the mercenaries, the commoners had their own fields, jobs to do, and money to earn. Their lives were much better than before. With the thought of not forgetting the person who dug the well when they drank water, they would naturally be grateful and support such a force. There was no need to mention the Han people. Ever since this place became Lao province, their status was extremely stable, regardless of whether it was in terms of treatment or the degree of respect they received. As Han citizens, they were given more farmland than the other races. Even if they were to work, their income would still be twice that of the other races. As Han citizens, they also enjoyed a high personal status. For example, when they walked on the streets, even the other races' officials would have to take the initiative to stop and let them pass first. This was something that the Han people had never enjoyed before. Furthermore, this was all brought to them by the mercenaries, so how could they not be grateful? However, they were the only ones who truly supported the mercenaries. As for the nobles and tycoons, they would only treat those who gave them more benefits. On the other hand, there was no need to talk about friendship. Only benefits were eternal. Long Qi also had such thoughts. He wanted to borrow the might of the mercenaries, but he did not want to get too close to them. This was the true thinking of people at his level. Right now, Luan Shaoqin's words of, "Your contributions will not be forgotten by the world," made him feel as though he had found a soulmate. He then thought about how everyone was not optimistic about him and wanted to isolate him. However, the mercenaries who used to be his enemy were actually treating him so highly. Under such a comparison, he could not help but feel like crying. When Luan Shaoqin saw Long Qi's expression, a smile appeared in his eyes. He knew that the other party was in a difficult situation and needed his help. There was no need for him to be courteous. As if he had just thought of something, he said, "Mr. Long, you were once a grand tutor. I'm sure you have a lot of connections. How about this? If you have the time, you can interact with some of the nobles and contact some of them to contribute to the development of Lao province. If you need any help, our provincial government is willing to back you up. How about that?" Chapter 603. This was an invitation. Long Qi was stunned at first, but before he could react, Higuang's elbow had already pressed against his waist. Although he didn't speak, the meaning was already very obvious. That is, there is such a good thing. You should quickly agree. Of course, this was a good thing. This meant that Luan Shaoqin needed Long Qi to unite the hearts of the nobles. This was equivalent to working for the mercenaries. If anyone dared to disrespect Long Qi, it would not only be disrespecting Long Qi, but it would also be disrespecting the Lao's government and the mercenaries. The result would be obvious. In fact, Long Qi was not very old, just over 50 years old. He could still continue to shine. The most important thing was that he used to be the state preceptor here, so he was very familiar with the upper class. The matter of unifying the hearts of the nobles, in the eyes of an outsider like Luan Shaoqin, may not be easy to do. It would take a lot of time just to investigate and understand some things, but it was not a problem for him. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was easy to do. Thinking that once he could become a representative of the mercenaries, who would dare not to give face to him, Long Qi's heart immediately became lively. At the moment, his old face flushed red, and he cupped his fist to Luan Xiaoli. "Thank you, Governor Luan. As long as my old bones are still here, I will do my best to do this matter." "Ha, good." Luan Shaoqin laughed and reached out to help Long Qi up. This was also an unexpected surprise. With Long Qi as the vanguard, many things will be much smoother. At least, he knew who could be friends and who could be enemies. It was okay to be generous to friends, but to enemies, there was only one word: kill. Kill until they were terrified, kill until they were afraid, and if it still didn't work, then kill until they were all dead. Anyway, the lives of the foreigners were never the first. After greeting Long Qi, Luan Shaoqin's gaze fell on Nongxi again. The Sorengan family is a famous business family. This governor has also heard of it. You are very business-minded and capable. Your business channels are also perfect, which is admirable. I don't dare. Nongxi saw that Long Qi had already leaned over, and his face was already full of envy. But he knew that such a good thing had nothing to do with him. Not for anything else, just because they were businessmen. Businessmen could not be too political. Otherwise, if they wanted to do business in other countries to make money, they would be ostracized. That would be a great loss. Luan Shaoqin did not have the intention to rope him in. The development of Laos could not be done without businessmen. But that didn't mean that he couldn't live without a single merchant. Could it be that he, Butcher Zhang, would be able to eat a pig with hair if he left? As they spoke, they arrived at the banquet hall. Luan Shaoqin naturally sat at the head of the table. Higuang sat on the left, Long Qi sat on the right, and Nongxi sat on the opposite side. Wine and dishes were served, followed by a toast. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, everyone was almost done eating. Next, it was time to get down to business. Nongxi gave full play to his potential as a businessman. He told the story of Sorengan clan's encounter on the Mekong River as if it was a story. He didn't add anything, nor did he add any personal opinions. He knew that such a big event couldn't be exaggerated at all. Otherwise, it would easily backfire. Luan Shaoqin listened very carefully. Even when Nongxi finished talking, he did not express his opinion at the first moment. On the other hand, Higuang, who was sitting on the left, reprimanded General Hun Sen's behavior. It seemed that he did it deliberately. After all, he was now a mercenary. Of course, he had to stand on the right side. Hun Sen? What's his background and identity? Luan Shaoqin wanted to know more about the situation, so he looked at the 3 people. "Let me answer that," Long Qi said. He had always wanted to perform well. As a former state preceptor, he was very familiar with the situation of the surrounding countries. It was not an exaggeration to say that he knew everything. From Long Qi, Luan Shaoqin learned more about Hun Senator Hun Sen was one of the important military representatives of the Golden Bian dynasty. His position in the army was second only to General De'en. Although they were both generals, Hun Sen and Dun were quite different. General Dun would treat his soldiers with sincerity. Unless it was necessary, he would not be too cruel to his soldiers. If possible, he would try his best to give his soldiers some opportunities to improve themselves. Hun Sen was different. This person was ruthless and extremely greedy. He even dared to embezzle the pay of his soldiers, which caused many people to be dissatisfied with him. However, this person was very good to those who were stronger than him. He would give gifts during festivals, which made him a good impression in the eyes of the higher-ups of the Golden Bien Kingdom. Even King Boromir had a good impression of him. It could be said that he was a typical example of flattering the superior and bullying the inferior. There were too many people who had received benefits from him, so it was difficult to touch him. After Long Qi introduced the situation one by one, he finally added some of his own thoughts. As far as this old man knows, although this person is ruthless, he is still very discerning when doing things. He is very clear about who can be offended and who can't be offended. This time he suddenly attacked the Sorangon family, which is different from his usual behavior. It is really unreasonable. What Long Qi meant was that the Sorangon family was a part of Lao province and had a good relationship with Daen in the Golden Bien Kingdom. Logically speaking, Hun Sen should not have any thoughts of attacking them. Could it be that he was blinded by greed and dared to rob money for money? Long Qi could not be blamed for having such thoughts. This matter was not done by Hun Senator, it was done by Yunk with Yang Chindong's consent. The reason why Hun Sen was chosen was that this person was very greedy and was very famous. If he was not the scapegoat, who else could it be? Of course, Luan Shaoqian would not delve into the reason. He only knew that the citizens and merchants of Lao province had been persecuted. As the governor of the province, he had to seek justice. Otherwise, an official who only knew how to be unruly in his own home would not be respected. After seriously understanding the matter, Luan Shaoqian's eyes fell on Nong Si, wanting to hear his opinion. Nong Si knew that it was time for him to express his opinion, so he told Long Qi his plan. Governor Luan, I have arranged for someone to go to the Golden Bien Kingdom and ask Hun Sen to return the stolen money. I also sent someone to plead with General Dun, hoping that he can put some pressure on Hun Sr. That's it? Luan Shaoqian looked at Nong Si for a long time and realized that Nong Si had finished speaking. He looked at him with some dissatisfaction. Yes, that's it. Nong Si nodded with a puzzled face. He thought to himself, isn't it enough? It's already good enough to recover the lost money. As for the people who were killed, they can only blame themselves for their bad luck. That's not enough. Luan Shaoqian shook his head decisively, then looked at Nong Si and said, Patriarch, since you have come to me, it means that you have found the Lao provincial government. If this matter is so simple, it is tantamount to blasphemy against the provincial government. Do you understand? Ah. Nong Si just wanted to recover the lost money and reopen the trade with the Golden Bien Kingdom. He didn't think so much. Looking at Nong Si's shocked face, Luan Shaoqian shook his head. Businessmen are businessmen after all. They only see the benefits in their eyes. How can they see the big picture? It seems that I need to remind him. Patriarch, now I'm giving you two choices. First, pretend that you didn't report this matter to the provincial government, and we didn't receive your request. You can deal with it yourself. Whether you suffer a loss or gain, it's your family's business. Second, report this matter to the provincial government and ask them to hand over the murderer, compensate for the loss, and make a public apology and guarantee that this kind of thing won't happen again. As for whether they will agree or not, we will communicate with them. If they are really arrogant and don't put the citizens and businessmen of Lao in their eyes, then we'll have to teach them a lesson. Teach them a lesson? He Guang heard it clearly. Governor Luan, do you mean to send troops? I don't rule out that possibility. Luan Shaoqian didn't hesitate and said directly, Hiss! Whether it was He Guang, Long Qi, or Nong Si, when they heard that Luan Shaoqian didn't rule out the possibility of sending troops, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It's just losing some money and some people. These losses are the Sorangan family's own business. They didn't pay more taxes to the Lao government. But because of this, Luan Shaoqin didn't hesitate to send troops. This result is really unexpected, and they didn't even think about it before. At this moment, the way the three looked at Luan Shaoqin changed. Although this person is still young, he seems to be covered with a layer of halo that makes people look up to him. Okay, patriarch, you can make a choice. What I can say is that no matter what choice you make, I will respect you. But please remember, if you don't want to make a big deal out of this, then all the consequences of this matter will be borne by your family. If you encounter unfair things in the future, don't think that we will stand up for you. In other words, there is only one chance, understand? Of course, Luan Shaoqin had his own reasons for saying this. Lao had just been established, and there were too many things to be done. It was not the right time to start a war. It would be best if they could avoid it. However, if the Sorangan family were to request the government, it would be a different story. If they were to ignore the request, it would be a disheartening blow to the hearts of the people, which would be detrimental to the establishment of a united Lao province. Chapter 604. For the sake of the people, for a better and more united Laos. Even if the time was not right, he dared to fight, because he believed in the sixth young master and the mercenary army. As for giving Nong Si only one chance to choose, it was because a government could not be controlled by businessmen. Today you want to do this. Tomorrow you want to do something else. Do you think the government is run by you alone? Now he had to make a decision to stop this kind of thing from happening again. Luan Shaoqin stated the conditions, and it was Nong Si's turn to think about it. This was a serious matter, and it might even involve the mercenary army. He had to be careful. Luan Shaoqin did not intend to urge him. Instead, he chatted with He Guang and Long Qi about the rich families in Laos. The casual conversation also allowed him to know more about the country, especially about some of the hidden nobles. He got first-hand information about what kind of people they were and what they liked. As for Nong Si, his forehead was covered with layers of cold sweat. He really couldn't make this decision. He wanted to ask if he could go back and think about it, but he thought about Luan Shaoqin's identity. This time he took the initiative to ask for help. How could he be given time to think about it? However, if he really sent the army for a few 100,000 taels of silver, it would be a bit of a joke. But if he did not ask Luan Shaoqin, would Hun's son let him go? He had already robbed him once, and he had already offended him. He was afraid that there would not be a second time. Increase the protection of the caravan? What a joke! That was Hun Sen's territory. Even if he hired more people, how could he be a match for Hun's son? Not to mention that hiring one more person would cost more money, which was not in line with the rules of businessmen to save money. In other words, if he did not ask for help from the Laos government, he was afraid that the Sarangans would not be able to trade with the Phnom Penh dynasty in the future. Not only would he lose a big customer, but he might also cause Luan Shaoqin's dissatisfaction. What? You came to ask me for help, but after I gave you an idea, you became timid. What do you think the Laos government is? On the other hand, if things got out of hand, the business of the Golden Rim dynasty might really be abandoned. But it wasn't that there weren't any benefits. On the contrary, there would be great benefits. After this incident, the Solangan family would become famous. In the future, wherever their caravan went, who would dare to provoke them? Wouldn't they be afraid of the mercenary army? In the long run, enduring the pain for a while seemed to be a good thing. After all, he Nong Si was still young and had some guts. In addition, if he couldn't solve this problem, he would have to give up the position of patriarch. This was something he was unwilling to accept. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one choice left. How is it? Has the clan leader made his decision? Luan Shaoqin could wait, but he couldn't wait endlessly. There were so many things for him to deal with. Every minute was precious to him, knowing that he had to make a decision. Nong Si's eyes flashed with determination. Okay, I'll listen to Governor Luan's orders. He Guang and Long Qi weren't surprised that Nong Si would be so tactful. If he hadn't made such a choice, they would have been suspicious and cut off all ties with him. After all, in a place like Lao Province, disobeying Luan Shaoqin wouldn't lead to anything good. Okay. Luan Shaoqin patted the table to show that he was a little excited. That's it. Don't stop what the Solingen family has been doing. Once the Golden Rim dynasty gives a result that is not satisfactory, you report it to Yang Pao. After everyone knows about it through the World Knowledge Tea House, it's time for our government to step in. Luan Shaoqin didn't intend to directly put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty. He even used the excuse of sending troops. At this stage, the main focus of the provincial government was still on economic development. If he really did this, it was inevitable that he would encounter some opposition. Although, with his identity and relationship with Yang Qindong, he could make his words carry weight. After all, they were all working together. It was better not to fall out with him if it was possible. If this matter was reported to Yang Bao and the whole world knew about it, then even if it was for the sake of dignity and face, they could only fight. Only the people in the government would not say anything else. Only when the people's hearts were united could they do great things. Luan Shaoqin made a plan according to his thoughts. After an hour, he left He Mansion in a low-key manner. Unless he had arranged a spy here before, otherwise, he would not know that Governor Luan had visited his mansion at night. When Yang Qindong received the information from the Security Bureau that Luan Shaoqin had visited He Mansion at night and met with Long Qi and Nong Si secretly, the corners of his mouth curled up. No, Governor Luan knows when to advance and when to retreat. It's good that he knows to keep a low profile before things are settled. But if that's the case, I think we have to speed up our actions. Looking at the vast, dense forest in front of him, he issued a military order. Speed up the march and gather at the designated place. The capital of the Golden Rim dynasty was Golden Rim City. The people sent by the Solingens finally arrived. They found General Dagan and asked him to put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty. At the same time, they found General Hun's son to express their dissatisfaction and their intention to ask for the silver back. Hun's son was naturally confused. Why did he have to give the silver back to them? Moreover, it was more than 100,000 taels. Did they think he was easy to bully? They could find any reason to bully him. The other party was just a businessman from Laos. He couldn't represent the Laos government, let alone the mercenaries. Why should he be afraid of such a person? As a result, he was kicked out before he could even see General Hun Sen's face. The soldiers also threatened that if he dared to make trouble again, it wouldn't be as simple as kicking him out next time. At least a part of his body would be left behind. The people from the Solingens who found General Dagan didn't have a good ending. General Dagan had only received some benefits from them. Why would he fall out with another general with real power for such a small benefit? Choosing the lesser of two evils, Dagan's approach wasn't wrong. But what he did was equivalent to cutting off all hope for the Solingens. The people who were sent out returned to Wansheng City and reported the result to the patriarch Nong Si. If it was before, Nong Si would have been heartbroken and helpless when he heard the result. But now, he knew that Governor Luan would take action. He naturally had confidence in his heart. He immediately ordered people to find the arranged reporters and let them report to Yang Pao about the tragedy of the Solingens caravan in Shandong City of the Golden Rim dynasty. It was also known as the Mekong River tragedy. The next day, the Yang family published the Mekong River tragedy in the newspaper. The news spread through the World Knowledge Tea House and soon caused a great sensation. The injustice suffered by the Solingens in the Golden Rim dynasty had been spread throughout the upper class of Laos. This was naturally because of Long Qi. During this period of time, under the banner of Luan Shaoqin, he secretly met with many nobles of the Lan Song kingdom. While deepening his friendship with them, He also reached a lot of consensus. This was not only because Long Qi, as the state preceptor, was good at talking with people. There was also a more important reason. All the nobles knew that there was no hope of reviving the country. Even their king, Piacy, was said to have been sent to the sea and put under house arrest. Without a leader, they were like a pile of loose sand. It was too difficult for them to make any progress. They were defeated one by Long Qi using various means. It was one thing for Long Qi to say it, but it was another thing for it to be published in Yangpao. This would make it known to everyone. It was even tantamount to forcing the government to make a statement. Could it be that the young Governor Luan was ready to put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty and was even prepared to go to war? When the nobles were still guessing how much trouble this matter would cause, the news spread to the people and really caused a lot of anger. Many people were very unhappy with the behavior of the Golden Rim dynasty. With the help of some people, there were already many people who thought that the Golden Rim dynasty should give an explanation for this matter. If they still did not bow down, then they would not hesitate to go to war. For this reason, many young people said that once the war started, they were willing to sign up for the army and do their best to protect the dignity of Laos. There was a motive, a reason, and even a momentum was created. On the third day, Luan Shaoqin, who had been secretly paying attention to this matter, finally expressed his opinion at a meeting of the provincial government. He had every reason to suspect that the injustice suffered by the Sorangan family was caused by the Phnom Penh dynasty. Their ultimate target was Laos, which was still under construction and development. As the governor of Laos, he said that he liked peace and loved peace. However, if anyone dared to trample on the dignity of Laos, then he would not hesitate to go to war. Even if he had to pay the price, he would seek justice and an explanation. He even reserved the right to send troops to seek justice. Luan Shaoqin's words naturally caught the staff of the provincial government off guard. This was an economic development meeting. How could they talk about war? Wasn't this off topic? However, anyone who had seen Yangpao in the past 3 days knew that Governor Luan was also forced. After all, the people under his rule had been treated unfairly. If they did not make a statement and did not give an explanation, then who would believe them? As a result, although Luan Shaoqin suddenly made a statement, there was no one who stood up to stop him at the meeting. This was because not only did they doubt Luan Shaoqin's ability, but also the vast majority of the people of Laos. In the face of such a powerful force, who would stand up to stop him? You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.